Well, hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. I'm back. Although, I gotta tell you guys, I legitimately almost died last night. I'm not even joking. I legitimately almost died on the way home because I flew out. So for those who don't know, the reason that I haven't been around the last couple of days and streaming my show is because I was in the bustling metropolis of Boise, Idaho, and I've never been to Boise before, and it was very nostalgic. It was kind of like exactly like you would expect Boise, Idaho to be. But a really nice guy brought me out to do a presentation at a bar in front of a room full of like conservatives and to teach them about like socialism and stuff like that. And I was like, that's actually really cool, man. I got to do my how to speak socialist training. It wasn't even my how to speak socialist training because I completely rewrote it the night before. And I actually think I made the how to speak socialist training introduction even simpler in this presentation. Like, and actually I think I'm going to be making this available. This was actually I actually did like a PowerPoint deck. I did a PowerPoint deck that talked about all the socialist stuff and that showed people, stuff from the socialism conference and like the reproductive justice conference. And I really think I got down how to talk about some of these ideas in a really succinct way. I can make these slides available if people want to see them, but I was actually doing this like in just like to it was It was in Eagle, Idaho. It's oh gosh, I'm so bad. I forget the name. I hate the names of things. I will get you guys the information out of it. But like one of the things is they they recorded the whole thing. So they have like professional video of it. So hopefully we get the video of it at some point and that'll be cool. But I got to tell you, this was the first time that I ever did like the how to speak socialist training in person. And I was thrilled. It was really well received. I think the version that I created for this is actually like the best introductory one I've done. So maybe I'll even do it like live on a stream or something just to have like an introductory video to it. But it was so well received. The audience asked so many good questions. It was completely packed. Listen, Patrick says, perhaps you can do the same in South Dakota. Folks here need to get their head out of their asses. I would actually really like to be going out on the road and doing speaking. It's something I used to do a lot of before the pandemic. It was actually most of what my business was built on before the pandemic was going out and speaking for like corporate events or like retreats or even just like conferences and keynoting and stuff like that. I would actually love to be able to do that with like the how to speak socialism stuff. Maybe that's something that I'll try because it really like it was I know I black pill a lot on this channel in terms of like not feeling like my work is valued and not feeling like people are listening and constantly feeling like I'm beating my head against the wall, like with conservative influencers being so far behind what we're doing and to go out there and to present it just a very bare bones like introduction, like here is what is actually going on. They're going after capitalism, which is private property ownership. Here's how that relates to race. How that relates to gender. Here's how that relates to the nuclear family. And they got it. The people in the room, some of whom had heard of me before, but most of them hadn't, they got it. And it was like, if I can just get this content in front of normal people, then they get it. The problem is, I just don't know how to get it in front of like normal people. And maybe that's something that you guys can help me with if people have ideas about how to do that. So it was a little bit of a white pill moment. I mean, there was a whole Q&A that happened after the presentation. They asked so many good questions. It was like, it was honestly, it was really nice. It was really, really good. And so that's where I was. And so how did I almost die? Well, I flew back last night. I flew from Boise to Minnesota. I had to sprint across the goddamn Minnesota airport in order to make my connecting flight, and my bag barely made it like that too. And then I get back to Boston, and there is a massive like rain and wind and sleet. There's like a storm in Boston, and apparently it's already snowing in Vermont. And part of me was like, should I just get a hotel? Should I? But it was like 12. It was like after midnight. And I was like, no, I just want to go home. I just want to sleep in my bed. And I talked myself into it too. I was like, Carlin, you grew up in Vermont. You know how to drive in the snow, girl. You got this. They're like, it's not even that far away. There's going to be no like cars on the road. It's super late at night. You know how to drive in the snow. You can make it home. Well, I haven't driven in snow and weather and rain and black iced roads like that in a long ass time, man. Yeah, I do not have four-wheel drive on my car because I just don't drive my car that much. So, like, my next car is going to be a Jeep Wrangler. So I know that's going to be, but that's not the car I have right now. And I got to tell you, there was one point I fucking hydroplaned in the road, like in the middle of the fucking highway. I was like fucking swerving all over. Like, thank God there were no cars around me because I absolutely would have hit someone. I was like, the only reason I was able to get that together, it was there were no cars around me. I was like swerving all over the place. And then I get into New Hampshire, and New Hampshire has not plowed the roads, and there are several inches of snow. And I'm just like, I'm like white knuckling it, like counting down every single mile until I got home. And so it took me probably twice as long as it normally does, but I made it home. I didn't die. I genuinely thought I was going to. Oh god, and then I said, "Victor, I'm never leaving the house again. That's it. That's it. I'm done. I'm never leaving again." But I made it back. And I missed you guys. I miss streaming. I always have the best intentions of streaming while I'm on the road, and then I just never do because I'm so tired. I'm tired and I'm busy, and I'm tired and I'm busy. And so now we're back, and we're going to get back to streaming. So, guys, welcome to The Cult. The Cult is a show that I do normally Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. on this here YouTube channel, on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, and on a Rumble, where we do deep dives into the far left political ideology, the cult of the socialist left. And usually what we're going to do, what we do is we watch full form training videos. How we learn about what the left is doing is not by reading academic papers. It is by watching their trainings in the real world and listening to them explain to us what they are actually doing. Because the thing about the left is they say the quiet part out loud all the time. Now, we've got a really exciting presentation we're going to be watching today, and I have to give a great big shout out, and I believe he is in the chat, to our old friend, Stu Studio. Who remembers Stu Studio? We watched a presentation about queer something or other, something queer, that Stu Studio foyed for us not too long ago. What was it? A queer teach-in. Let's see if we can find it. And I strongly recommend everyone go make sure you subscribe to Stu. Go follow him on Twitter. He's doing a great job getting some of these woke trainings that would just not even see the light of day otherwise. So it's actually really great. Look at all this great stuff he's got on his channel. Just like random. This is what we watched. James Madison University's queer teach-in on pleasure activism. Hey, Stu. Yeah, that was a great video. And he's doing great work. He's just doing yeoman's work of just like getting these presentations that no one else is getting access to and like putting them on YouTube. And I really do think like this is exactly what we need to be doing. If there's anything that I learned over my trip to Idaho is that if you just put the information in front of people and you just explain it very, very slowly and you know, not slowly, but like you explain it in a very succinct way that makes it easy for them to like understand what they're looking at, people get it. We don't need to do these like flowery pontifications. We don't need to be writing papers about this shit. The very best way to teach normal people what the left is doing is to show normal people what the left is doing. I know, it's a shocking revelation. But Stu recently sent me this presentation, and it looks really good. Rutgers hosted the Palestine is a feminist, queer, anti-imperialist abolition struggle with the University of Illinois at Chicago's Nadine, who Nadine is a socialist. I know we've seen her before, and Rutgers Maya. This event was sponsored by the Department of American Studies, Gender Studies, and the Afterlives of Liberation Mellon Sawyer Seminar. Now, what the heck is that? Stu says it's part of the Mellon Foundation. What is that? The Afterlives of Liberation Mellon Sawyer Seminar? We should look into that. That sounds like it could be promising. Let me just pop that in the chat. Stu says the professor on the left makes $200,000 and the one on the right makes $100,000 and was hired because she is an activist. Well, that all rings true to me, Stu. So, guys, we're going to watch this presentation today, and it's got every fabulous buzzword that we like to hear. Stu, when was this presentation actually given? I know you uploaded it the other day, but when was this actually given? Let us know. I would appreciate it. Oh, Bot just found something for us on that Mellon thing. Let's see. What is that Mellon thing? Hang on. The Sawyer Seminars, the Afterlives of Liberation, Anti-Racist Praxis for the 21st Century. To support a Sawyer Seminar of the Comparative Study of Cultures, entitled after, we already know that, $225,000. Okay, so Stu says this was 2 weeks ago or February 20th. So relatively recently. Relatively recently. We'll go with that. How do I get how can I get a nonprofit organization to give me a $200,000 grant? Is there any conservative nonprofit organization that wants to give me a $200,000 grant to just travel around the country going undercover at gender ideology events? I would do it. We need to find that. That's actually what we need. What organizations can I get free money from in order to travel around and just do undercover journalism? Because like I can do stuff from my computer and that's all fine, well and good, but like traveling requires plane tickets, it requires hotel rooms, it requires freaking Uber, it requires all that other stuff. And if I can just find some organization that can like give me $200,000 just to fuck around. Okay, obviously it's not fucking around. To do the hard and arduous work of coming up with constantly changing disguises with which to disguise myself to go to gender ideology webinars and tape them and put them on the internet. Not webinars, seminars, conferences, trainings. You guys know what I'm talking about. I gotta make that pitch a little bit more concise if I'm if I'm actually going to be asking for $200,000. The Home Depot, that's not a bad idea, Stu. This is what I need to find. I need to find some like rich conservative who like he doesn't buy into the conservative ink stuff and he actually like kind of like understands these things and he thinks it's all bullshit and he's got a lot of money to burn. I just need to find like some conservative sugar daddy that like doesn't mind that I'm a little rough around the edges, doesn't mind that I'm a little bit uppity, actually kind of likes that I'm uppity, actually kind of gets off on the fact that I'm uppity. Which many men actually do, to be honest about it. They really do. They don't admit it, but they do. That's what I need to find. We all need to work on this project together. Where is my conservative sugar daddy that can just bankroll me flying around the country? You know, that's not. Maybe. Maybe. Okay, everyone just think on that. We'll come back to that later. Okay, so this was a grant-related hobby. The Hobby Lobby family? I think they might be too Christian for me, though. And that's not to say I can't work with Christians. The guy who flew me out to Idaho is a Christian, and like, I mean, very Christian. His family is very Christian. He was very nice. So, and he knows that I'm uppity about like Christian stuff on Twitter. He was like the nicest, like it was a wonderful experience. So maybe, you know, I can't write off all Christians just because some Christians don't like me. And the Hobby Lobby family does have a lot of money. That's true. Yeah, it's kind of like if you never ask, then you don't give it an opportunity to show up in the world, right? Anyway, so guys, this is what we're going to be watching today. We're going to sit back and relax, and for the next hour and 25 minutes, or probably more, we're going to be learning about Palestine as a feminist, queer, anti-imperialist abolition struggle. Now, pop quiz for the chat before we get into it. What do all those words mean? When socialists say Palestine is a feminist, queer, anti-imperialist abolition struggle, let me know what all those words mean in the chat. Rumble, if you want to chat in too, I've got the pop-out chat on the screen so I can see the Rumble chat as well. While you guys are formulating an answer, I do just want to remind you to head over to my Substack and sign up. That is Carlin, KARLYN.substack.com. Make sure while you are there, you sign up for the next round of the How to Speak Socialist live trainings. Now, these are live classes that I do for anyone who wants a crash course into socialism. If you have attended my How to Speak Socialist webinars in the past, I'm doing both a level 1 and a level 2 version in this round, okay? Level 1 is the same training I've already done 2 times before. So if you've already been in my level 1 training before, you probably don't need to sign up for that one, okay? But level 2 is going to be a completely new deep dive specifically into queer Marxism. So we're going to go abolish the gender binary. We might even hit on some reproductive justice stuff. We're definitely going to do some abolish the family in that one. So that's going to go a much deeper dive than I've been able to so far into those specific areas, which I think is some of the most interesting stuff. Also, some of the most cringy stuff. So that's fun too. If you want to do level 1 again, bot, yes, you can. You're welcome to take it. These are completely free. They're open to the public. You can make a donation when you sign up, but you don't have to make a donation. And so definitely spread the word about these. I'd like to get as many registered attendees as possible. You can find out about that over on my Substack. Again, that's Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. And if you head over to the Unwoke Art Store, it was a little bit late, but the official April Unwoke Wiki limited edition design shirt has launched. Now, to be fair, I actually did get the design into the store on April 1st. I just didn't get anything else done by April 1st. So the design was actually in the store on April 1st, and now we're officially launching it. And this is the new Unwoke Wiki design. Now, I wanted with this one, I wanted to do some flowers because it's spring. But I also wanted it to be just kind of like haunting and cool and like it's just a cool fucking shirt, right? Like I want to wear this shirt. And then that's the front of the shirt. And then on the back, we've got the socialist revolution is real, directing people to the Unwoke Wiki. So you become a walking billboard for it. This is something I do every single month. I launch new Unwoke Wiki merchandise that is only available for that month. The proceeds of this are going to go to fund the Unwoke Wiki. We got the baseball shirt. We've got the hoodie. And I'm like, I gotta get one of the hoodies. Oh my god, they're so fucking cool. And we got the stickers as well. So that is available in the Unwoke Art Store right now. And don't tell anyone because I didn't put this in the store, but those shirts are 25% off for the next week and a couple days up until not this Saturday, but next Saturday. So if you want to get that shirt now, you can actually get it at 25% off. All of the Unwoke Wiki merch is 25% off up until the 13th. So I'm just saying, if you want to get it, the discount is automatically applied at checkout. Don't tell anyone, okay? It's a special surprise just for people who watch the stream. The shirt looks anti-Semitic. How does it look anti-Semitic? It does not look anti-Semitic. It's got sunflowers, bro. How can sunflowers be? It's a plague doctor. God. Everyone always got to be causing problems. Everyone always got to be causing problems. Saying things are anti-Semitic that are not anti-Semitic. All right, let's go back. Let's see. What did you guys say? So I asked you guys to tell me what these words mean. Palestine is a feminist, queer, anti-imperialist abolition struggle. What does this mean? Let me see. Okay, I'm scrolling back, finding in the chat. No one is free until everyone is free. That's a good. That was actually one of the questions that was asked at the bar, by the way. Someone asked about the Queers for Palestine thing. They were like, why do, excuse me, why do queer people support Palestine? And I was like, oh God, that's a perfect question. All of those words mean anti-capitalism. Exactly, Patrick. Anti-capitalist. Those are Marxist, baby. Liberation. Let me see. Queer is a far left political ideology. Yup. They're talking about a socialist revolution occurring in Palestine. Yes, they are. The Marxists against capitalist oppression. Pretty much, Rottweiler, pretty much. They all point to capitalism, the struggle for freedom from capitalism, anti-capitalism. There you go, bot. Not everyone is free until not free until everyone is free from capitalism. It's all about anti-capitalism. But, well, not as much. Kind of. But who is the oppressor? The oppressor is the evil capitalist. Who is the oppressed? The oppressed is the proletariat. So let's just cut right to the chase and say capitalism, because that's what it is. Let's see. Anti-capitalist. Imperialism is synonymous with capitalism. Yup. Liberation from the oppressive force of capitalism. You guys are so good. Lots of great answers. Excellent work, guys. Well done. Let's see. Let me scroll in the chat. See if I missed anything. All right. Yeah, Stu, the gender binary is colonization. Exactly. All right, guys. Well, let's get this party started. Please make sure you mount that like button for me. Please make sure you are subscribed to the channel if you are not already, whether you're watching on YouTube or Rumble or X. I do appreciate it. Again, I stream Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. I stream Saturdays at 6 p.m. for Socialism Saturday. We're always watching woke training and breaking it down to show you all the stuff your influencers will never show you so you can be years ahead of the game. Let's see what happened at Rutgers University. Oh, Rottweiler. Sorry, Rottweiler. Actually, a couple. Wait, hang on. Is that Rottweiler? Rottweiler, I don't see a super chat from you. I see 2 super chats from Naruto that I missed though, so we'll go with this. I don't see a super Rottweiler, just type in what you typed in the super chat and I'll display it. I don't know what's going on there. Moms for Liberty pro tip. When The Simpsons starts making fun of you, you know you've gone off the deep end. Yeah. Bro, The Simpsons are making fun of Moms for Liberty's book bans? Come on. Like, you've jumped the damn shark, Moms for Liberty. Sorry. Naruto says, Israel may have started World War III the other day by breaking international law and attacking the Iranian embassy in Syria. Thanks, Naruto. I was not keeping up on my World War III content. And now, like, I just wasn't keeping up on it. But now I know. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. All right. Yeah, I don't know what happened, bro. I don't see any, But you know what's hang on, you know what's weird though? Hang on 1 second, Rottweiler, because I think I see it like it looks like I did get a super chat that's just not showing up in StreamYard. So let me check. Let me check the actual back end of it. It might actually just be this. Hang on, let me just make sure because I definitely missed something and I don't want to miss anyone's super chats. I apologize for the delay, guys. 1 sec. I don't know why StreamYard does this to me. Let me just go in. I want to see my super chats, YouTube. Now I see it, Rottweiler. Okay, now it's showing up in the back end. So Rottweiler basically said this. Tim Pool decreed DEI is dead and Charlie Kirk is at war against contraceptives after being asked why the right is losing women's support. Well, actually, this was one of the questions that I was asked at the event that I did at the bar because they said like there was this one lady and she was a really nice lady, and so I'm not trying to like she was a very nice lady because we talked after the event. But during the event, she said, Carlin, like, who do you think is going to win? Do you think Trump is going to win or do you think Biden's going to win? And I said, I think Biden's going to win. And you could have heard a pin drop in that bar. And then she just started going, like, why? Like, how could how can they possibly vote for Biden? And I had to explain to like an entire bar full of conservatives. I was like, do you guys understand that you like people on your team have literally spent years pushing people like me away? Like, do you understand that all of the nonsense coming out of your politicians and your influencers and even Trump himself sometimes is so incredibly off-putting that even if you hate the left, you still can't support the right because it's so bad? And it's not that like and I tried to explain to them. I was like, "Do you want me to explain to you how many times I have been told to get the F out of the conservative movement even after I had already left? Do you want me to explain to you how miserable conservatives have made my life? How I get attacked way more by conservatives than I do by the left, which is bizarre since all I do is talk about how much the left sucks? Like, do you have any idea how many times I've been called a baby killer when I've never even had an abortion? Do you have any idea like how much bullshit like gets thrown in my lap unnecessarily by conservative influencers? Do you know that most of your conservative influencers don't even care about the things they claim to care about and they're just doing it for money, and yet you guys will choose them over like people who are actually trying to help you every day of the week? Like, I had to go through like the whole list and I was like, listen, it's not that I want the left to win. I don't want the left to win. But you guys are not providing me with a viable alternative. Like when I like Tim Pool declaring DEI is dead, bro, anyone who says that DEI is dead does not exist in the real world at all in any way. I was looking for presentations earlier on YouTube that have happened in the last week. There have been dozens of presentations just in the last week, all over college campuses, all over taxpayer funded institutions, Like, don't tell me DEI is dead when we are all still literally paying taxes to support DEI training at taxpayer-funded institutions. It's the stupidest idea in the world. And then Charlie Kirk going off on birth control. And now, like, the entire conservative right is talking about how birth control is bad for women and women are this and blah, 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 blah. It's like, bro, if you don't like birth control, don't take it. No one forces anyone to take birth control. I just don't even know what to say. But I do appreciate it, Rottweiler. I'm sorry that super chat didn't come up earlier. All right. Are we ready now? Are we ready to get started? Because we're not going to live in the fantasy world of DEI is dead, pinky swear, trust me, bro. We're not going to do that. We're going to watch an actual DEI presentation that was given at an actual college. And by the way, Rutgers is a taxpayer-funded institution. It is a state institution in New Jersey. The University of Illinois, Chicago is a state institution. So all this is like they have a grant, fine. It's fine that they have a grant, but the universities that they're from wouldn't exist without the taxpayer. So let's all remember that. So being that DEI is dead, I'm sure we will not see any crazy woke shit in this presentation at all. Let's get this party started.
Thank you all for coming and for joining us this evening to have this important conversation. You know, it's very difficult to mark what it is that the context of our conversation tonight. It's been 166 days of absolute warfare, siege, genocidal campaign against Palestinians in Gaza that began, and today is, what time is it now? It's like 10 to 6. Between the afternoon yesterday of 12 p.m. and today at 12 p.m., according to the Ministry of Health, 104 Palestinians were killed and 162 Palestinians were injured. Between October 8th, 2023 and noon today, at least 31,923 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza and 74,000 Palestinians have been injured in Gaza. At least of these deaths, 13,000 children. In January, the killing rate was estimated at one Palestinian, 250 a day.
Hang on. Ooga Booga says there's videos of you screaming at a Christian. Where is there a video of me screaming at a Christian, bro? This is over on Rumble for people who can't see this. Yeah, I don't know of any video of me screaming at a Christian. It sounds like you might be starting to start shit that isn't real, but okay, you can explain yourself or whatever.
Palestinians were being killed, and one Palestinian child was being killed every 10 minutes. Now, we're here for about 2 hours, maybe an hour and a half together. And in that time, about 4 to 5.
Let's see, Naruto says, last thing, what did you think of the conference I DM'd you on Discord last week that's happening in June? I don't know that I have any thoughts about it off of the top of my head, Naruto, other than like I made note of it and I just haven't had a chance to look at it yet. It's been a busy couple of weeks. I apologize. I did make a note of it. I haven't had a chance to really dig into it yet, but I appreciate it.
Palestinians will be killed by the hour, so about 6 will be dead by the time we end today. 4.5% of the entire population of the Gaza Strip is dead, missing, or injured.
Oh, shit. Bot just found the YouTube page for this Sawyer seminar stuff. Oh, they've got all sorts of stuff. Well done, Bot. That's perfect.
70% of the Gaza Strip's infrastructure is destroyed. 1.7 million people are displaced. And now we are witnessing a man-made famine that will only accelerate. And it's incredibly difficult. I know it's very hard with the scale of violence and with reckoning with the complicity of the United States, which is where we are today, and the reality that this is an American war, an American genocide. We all feel helpless. I want to acknowledge that. I feel helpless and I feel hollow almost every day. But at the very least, we can hold on to the spaces that we still have. And for now, that includes our university. So at this time when everything feels useless, what we are trying to do here on campus, students, faculty, staff, keep a space, however, it's like a window closing every day. But this space is incredibly important. And what we do to keep the conversation on Palestine and to keep centering Palestine and Palestinians at Rutgers University is incredibly important work. And I thank you all for coming, whether you're here online or in person. Also, thank you. So my name is Maya Mikdashi. I'm an associate professor here at Rutgers in the Department of Gender Studies. And I'm also the director for the Center for Middle East Studies. And we're really proud to have this event with somebody who I have learned so much from, and someone who we have immense respect for. And I want to thank our co-sponsors in helping us bring Nadine, the Department of American Studies, Department of Gender Studies, and the Afterlives of Liberation Mellon Sawyer Seminar. I've printed out some stats for today, if anyone is. This is the UN OCHA chart as of today. That lists Israeli and Palestinian casualties. Nadine Naber is a professor in the Gender and Women's Studies program and the Global Asian Studies program and the Department of Anthropology at the University of Illinois, Chicago. At UIC, she is the co-PI of the Middle East and Muslim Societies Cluster and co-organizer of the Global Middle East Studies Working Group. She is the author, co-editor of 5 books, including Arab America, Gender, Cultural Politics, and Activism. And I've taught this book in our department, and it's always really creates important conversations around ethnic studies frameworks, ethnography among immigrant it's a great book. Anyway, read it, teach it. It's a great book. That was 2012. Race and Arab Americans, 2008.
Where'd the sound go? Is that me? Did I do that? What happened?
So the faculty, YWC, writing a book titled Pedagogies of the Radical Mother, and a book titled Social Movement-Led Research Methodologies.
Pedagogies of the Radical
She's on the
Mother?
editorial board of JPS, Journal of Palestine Studies, and serves on the boards of organizations such as the Arab American Action Network, Shabaka, the National Council for Arab Americans, and the Feminist Peace Initiative. Please welcome me in. I just
can't talk anymore.
Yeah, it's very difficult to speak today. And the way this is going to run, we're going to have, Nadine will have a short presentation, then we will have a couple of questions to have a conversation about, and then we're going to open it up to questions. Iftar is, I think, 7:10, right? So there will be food arriving at around 6:30. We're going to try not to put it in here. We'll try to put it out there, keep it out there. All right.
Thank you so much, Maya. Thanks to all the organizers. It's such an honor to be here. And I have to admit, I'm intimidated by Maya because I think she's so brilliant. I've learned so much from her over the years, and it's such an honor to be sharing this conversation with you. I'm scared of your questions, though. Yeah, thanks, everyone. Well, as you knew from the intro, I was an activist in a way before I was an academic. So I come to this topic as a diasporic Arab activist, feminist, as well as a scholar of U.S. feminist of color social movements and Arab American, connecting Arab and Arab American activist movements. So I'm somewhat presenting in a bit of a teach-in style, you could say, given that we're working to end genocide, leaving no moment uninterrupted by our efforts. So in that spirit, I'll just dive in. I'm going to be feminist framework, you could say, for.
Let's see, I got a super chat from Patricia. It wasn't Tim Pool who said DEI was dead. He was quoting Charlemagne the God on The Daily Show. Well, I mean, anyone who takes Charlemagne the God as an expertise of what is going on in the real world, I just don't think that's a credible source. I'm sorry, and that's Tim is supposed to be a journalist. And I don't mean any offense towards you, Patricia. I appreciate the super chat. But Tim is supposed to be a journalist and he's quoting Charlemagne the God as an expert. I mean, you could frame it in terms of he's making a comment on what was said on The Daily Show. But this is what conservative influencers do. They lie to people. And when they lie to people, they give people an unrealistic vision of what is going on in the world. Let me give you an example. Back in 2021, I was working to try to help pass an anti-critical race theory bill in New Hampshire to prevent the teaching of critical race theory in schools. When I was doing that, every level of government in New Hampshire was controlled by Republicans. The House of Representatives was controlled by Republicans. The Senate was controlled by the Republicans. And the governor's office was controlled by the Republican, well, kind of a Republican, Chris Sununu, who claims to be a Republican. And during the process of trying to get that bill passed, Chris Sununu and his Republican cronies in the state Senate completely undermined the bill. They completely undermined it. And then they watered it down so it didn't actually ban critical race theory. And even the things that it did ban, when I could find a school in direct violation of that law and I reported them to the state did nothing about it. But do you know what they all did? They all went around saying, we banned CRT, we banned CRT, we banned CRT, we banned it, it's not in New Hampshire schools. We passed a bill. And that bill banned CRT, and that means it's no longer taught in our schools. And that's a lie. That is a flat-out lie. But in order to sell this political narrative that Republicans in New Hampshire banned critical race theory back in 2021, and the schools are totally safe, pinky swear, trust us, bro, they lied about what is actually going on, and they're giving conservative parents specifically the idea that these things are not taught in schools when in fact they are taught in schools. Not only are they taught in schools, but the schools are putting that they're teaching it on their damn website, but they're doing it in a way that most parents don't know how to access and don't know what they're looking at. So they don't know it's still taught in schools. So even though the Republicans in New Hampshire run around saying, we banned CRT, just like Ron DeSantis did in Florida. Ron DeSantis claims to have banned all woke ideas in Florida, but I have a high school teacher in Seattle on audio recording talking about being zoomed into Florida classes by teachers in Florida to teach banned concepts that they're not allowed to teach. So they just start up a Zoom and they zoom in some fucking outside teacher from out of state and they teach the concepts. It's called fugitive pedagogy or smuggler pedagogy. I have this on audio. I gave it to the governor's office. They didn't do shit. They did nothing. They probably didn't even look at it. So we can excuse Tim, I guess, if all he was doing is quoting Charlemagne the God. But the fact that conservative influencers are running around lying to people saying DEI is dead, DEI is dead, DEI is dead, DEI is dead, when it's provably not. It's just provably not. I can pull up dozens of taxpayer-funded DEI presentations that are posted to YouTube within the last week. And those are just the ones posted to YouTube. So they're giving people, normal people, average people who are relying on these people to tell them the truth, they are giving them really unrealistic expectations, because what they're hearing is, DEI's dead, we don't have to deal with this anymore, we won, we're winning, bro. And then they stop paying attention to it, and they stop doing anything about it. Because DEI is dead, why would they need to do anything about it? It's so this is a dangerous game that conservatives are playing, and they're doing it all for internet clout and money. And that's it. That's how I feel about it. I'm sorry.
For our activist work. Well, it is well established, especially out of Indigenous studies from scholars like Sarah Deer and Jennifer Dennett-Dale, that sexual violence is a tool of colonization. And this is a hugest trigger warning for a great deal of my talk. Indeed, the practices of rape and sexual assault that have been well documented during the founding of Israel that continue today are not an exception or a secondary impact of colonial violence, but are part of the settler colonial.
Did she just say that Israelis are raping Palestinians? Did I make that up? Did she just say Israelis are raping Palestinians?
For a great deal of my talk. Indeed, the practices of rape and sexual assault that have been well documented during the founding of Israel that continue today are not an exception or a secondary impact of colonial violence, but are part of the settler colonial white supremacist logics and practices of Israel that conflict.
She's saying that Israelis raping Palestinians is part of the overall plan of the colonization of Palestine that still continues to this day. Can someone call the ADL? Can someone call the like okay, I don't support the ADL, but can we call the ADL? And the ADL is not going to like this. No, I don't think she's saying proverbial rape. I think she's saying actual rape. Rottweiler says, no, he wasn't just quoting, we're talking about Tim Pool again. No, Tim Pool wasn't just quoting Charlemagne. He said DEI is gone. He said it's still just because some left influencers are speaking again. Tim Pool is so full of shit. I'm like, I really don't know why people listen to him. I don't. Well, no, I do know why, because they listen to him because he says the things they want him to say, or they listen to him to hate watch him. But let's not pretend that this is correct, because it's not.
Colonized women with the land and nature and assume that therefore to dominate the land necessitates dominating Palestinian women's bodies and their reproductive capacities.
They are talking about it. This is not proverbial rape. They're literally saying that the Israelis are dominating the Palestinian women's bodies. Let's just rewind and listen one more time. I'm sorry.
Jennifer Dennett-Dale, that sexual violence is a tool of colonization. And this is a hugest trigger warning for a great deal of my talk. Indeed, the practices of rape and sexual assault that have been well documented during the founding of Israel that continue today are not an exception or a secondary impact of colonial violence, but are part of the settler colonial white supremacist logics, and practices of Israel that conflate colonized women with the land and nature and assume that therefore to dominate the land necessitates dominating Palestinian women's bodies and their reproductive capacities.
Oh, okay. We got to break that down. First of all, they are indeed literally saying that the Israelis, part of their settler colonist strategy, is to rape the Palestinian women. They did say that. We've now listened to them say it 3 times. That is what was said. But I want to go back because it's even more crazy than that. Because what she is saying is that the settler colonialization of Israel, the settler colonization of Israel, which settler colonization means imposing the oppressive force of capitalism on a previously indigenous land. So in their minds, the Palestinians are indigenous people. They had the land belonged to the collective. Israel, the settler colonists came in and they privatized the land under the oppressive force of capitalism, which is how people like this see Israel. Israel is the capitalist oppressor. The Palestinians are the oppressed. Israel came in and colonized the land. And then what she said is that when Israel came in and colonized the land, they also saw women's bodies as the same as the land they had just colonized, which meant that they saw the Palestinian women as property, private property, which is the same as what they say when they say that capitalism caused slavery in America, slavery being the ownership of people as private property, and that slavery created systemic racism in America. It's the same thing. They're basically saying that when Israel colonized Palestine, that they also colonized the bodies of Palestinian women and made them private property, so essentially making Palestinian women the slaves to Israel, with which they could do whatever they want, to include raping them, which is apparently part of their strategy, according to this woman, not according to me, according to this woman. Including, forcing them to have children they don't want to have, stuff like that. Does everyone understand? That's what she just said. Let's just listen one more time so you can hear it.
Indeed, the practices of rape and sexual assault that have been well documented during the founding of Israel that continue today are not an exception or a secondary impact of colonial violence, but are part of the settler colonial white supremacist logics and practices of Israel that conflate colonized women with the land and nature and assume that therefore to dominate.
They conflate colonized women with the land and nature, and because they're conflating the colonized women with the colonized land, that means both the women and the land are privatized under the oppressive form of patriarchal capitalism, because the patriarchy was also created by capitalism because it put men in positions of power, etc., etc. Yes, that's what they're saying, Maldi. They're saying that when Israel colonized Palestine, not only did they privatize previously indigenous land, they also privatized the bodies of Palestinian women.
The land necessitates dominating Palestinian women's bodies and their reproductive capacities from 1948 until today. Of the nearly 70 massacres during the 1948 Nakba, Deir Yassin was one of these atrocities, where Israel enacted destruction, pillaging, rape, and displacement, just as we are seeing today in Gaza. Then and now, dismemberment, destruction, theft, killing, burning, and entrapping bodies, and rape have been permeable relationalities within the Zionist project. And continuing, continuing over the years since 48 at checkpoints, in the raids of Palestinian homes, and within the more central sites that we see in terms of Israeli sexual assault against Palestinians in the Israeli prison system. Not only are these enactments of sexual violence crucial decolonial feminist concerns, but they also reinforce and reproduce anti-Arab
Thanks,
and
Brooklyn.
anti-Muslim racism as a strategy to turn attention away from Israeli sexualized torture. Let me explain what I mean by that. And I'm going to do that by referring to the case of our beloved Rasmiya Alde, who was deported, a Palestinian activist leader who was deported from Chicago in 2017. In her court case, she was a political prisoner. She was incarcerated in an Israeli jail after she was coerced into a confession through sexualized torture in 1969 for a bombing. And after spending 10 years in prison, she was deported from her homeland. She lived in Chicago for 20 years and built her life and community. And then
Actually, this is a really good point from Dog Whistle Daniel. Communists see Jews as white when they are in Israel, but they see them as non-white outside of Israel, which is interesting. No, that you're exactly right about that. But why is that? That has nothing to do with reality. We all need to just like dispense with this. This is not something that's grounded into reality. But the reason that they see Jews as white in Israel and as non-white outside of Israel is because when they're in Israel, they are the oppressors. They are the bourgeois. They are the capitalists. They are the private property owners. They are the ones with all the resources. When they're outside of Israel, they are not the oppressors. They are the oppressed. I'm saying what they believe. I'm not saying what I believe. They see them outside of Israel as being oppressed, as being victimized, as being part of intersectionality. So that was a really good observation.
The U.S. relying on 500 pages of military documents from the Israeli courts deported her to Jordan. In her case, we learned about the pattern of using racist, colonial, sexist discourse. We learned about how Israel uses racist discourse about Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims in their sexualized torture. So let me explain. There is this racist assumption that Arab culture is hyper-misogynist and rooted in apparently backwards or savage concepts of family honor and shame. In one well-established pattern, Israeli soldiers threaten Palestinian detainees, but they will bring in a family member to watch the soldiers sexually assault them or punish them by sexually assaulting their family member. Indeed, Nada Elia has documented Israeli military intelligence officer, more recently, Mordechai Khadar, suggesting that the only thing that would deter attacks by a Hamas militant is knowing that if caught, his sister or his mother would be raped.
What?
This colonial strategy is driven by a racist idea.
She's saying that people have heard Israelis say that the way they're dealing with the Palestinians is to capture their wives and sisters and rape them in front of them as punishment. And she's saying that there's like evidence of this. Is that real? I'm sure that's not real. I'm sure like Israelis would never do that. Israelis would never do that. But let's just listen again.
In apparently backwards or savage concepts of family honor and shame. In one well-established pattern, Israeli soldiers threaten Palestinian detainees, but they will bring in a family member to watch the soldiers sexually assault them or punish them by sexually assaulting their family member. Indeed, Nada Elia has documented Israeli military intelligence officer, more recently, Mordechai Khadar, suggesting that the only thing that would deter attacks by a Hamas militant is knowing that if caught, his sister or his mother would be raped. This colonial strategy is driven by a racist
Wow.
idea that sexualized punishment is a special way to punish people from the Arab region. As this colonialist racist logic goes, since the many people often lumped together as Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims are considered exceptionally sexist, sexual violence is then deemed especially appalling to them. Of course, US soldiers used a similar logic against Iraqi war prisoners in a US prison. But I want to ask us, like my co-struggler Trishala Deb asks when she wrote about Abu Ghraib, for which culture would these acts of sexual assault, rape, and murder be less appalling? Today in Gaza, the UN has uncovered sexual assault, rape, and threats of rape, including Israelis taking and uploading photos of female detainees in degrading circumstances, borrowing again from the US in Iraq. And again, reinforcing that sexual shaming of Arabs is an exceptionally viable strategy of torture and dehumanization against them. And in fact, I was having a conversation with Dr. Asla yesterday, and I learned a great deal from her. So I think you should give a talk soon because you expanded my analysis on this, this strategy. We are then witnessing this colonial strategy. What it does is it shifts the gaze around who the agents of violence are from the colonizer to the colonized. And we've seen this since October 7th, whereby anti-Arab, anti-Muslim racism allows the long history of Israeli sexual violence against Palestinians to become invisibilized, insignificant, not worthy of outrage, compared to reports of rape by Israeli women.
Recording
as
stopped.
if it's easy to explain, you know, as if it's easy to explain when Israeli women are raped because it's obvious, it's the savage Muslims. But when the survivors are Palestinian or people of color more broadly, courts and popular discourse invisibilize it. So we should be asked, is it only after Israelis have reported experiences of rape are the US state, corporate media, and Zionists the world over finally wanting to talk about sexualized violence in Palestine?
Wait, check this out.
Check
this out. Stu, this is a really good point. So you guys just heard that they were recording this, and we know they've recorded other presentations in this series because Bot found the YouTube page where they've been posting them. But they stopped after the professor at the University of Chicago at Illinois started talking about how Israelis are raping Palestinian women as a way of keeping them under control and forcing Palestinian men to watch their wives and like sisters and mothers be raped by Israelis, they magically stopped the recording for reasons that I just can't understand. But luckily, our hero of the day, Stu Studio, was there, and he did not stop recording. So we appreciate you, Stu. We salute you.
Really want to end gender violence, we must all at once stand against all instances of sexualized violence, while simultaneously refusing to be manipulated into the US and Israel's colonial feminist instrumentalization of sexualized violence to justify.
I wonder if the Mellon Foundation, that's who is like sponsoring this, right? The Mellon Foundation. I wonder if they know that the $225,000 for this grant that they gave, I wonder if they know that that money is going towards lectures where they're saying that Israelis are raping Palestinian women as like a strategic part of their plan. That might be a good question, if I'm honest. Why is the Mellon Foundation sponsoring lectures to the tune of over $200,000 for this series in which leftist college professors are talking about Israelis raping Palestinians? Maybe we should ask that question.
By genocide. Israel's violent heterosexist strategies have at the least a double effect. They aim to scare Palestinian women from participating in resistance against colonization, And then again, that strategy also relies on a sexist, racist logic that if we threaten Palestinian women, Palestinian men, whose role in this racist logic is to protect their women, will then deter their women from joining the resistance. And as the US finds its perfect ally in Israel, it is no surprise then that Israeli discourse and practice can be understood as an extension of US imperial logics and histories of enslavement that continue in the prison industrial complex today, in the white supremacist necessity to punish perpetrators of violence against white women, especially if they are alone, whereas white supremacists, including cops and prison guards, can perpetrate sexualized violence against Black women with impunity. So let's now talk about reproductive injustice. The Israeli state's colonial violations as part of a larger project bent on erasing, eliminating, and disappearing Palestinians necessitates the control as well as the destruction of Palestinian women's alleged reproductive capacities within its colonial logic. Palestinian women are constructed as bearers of future.
Come on, sound. Come on.
Understand the horrific killing of Palestinian children. Long before October 7th, the long history of Palestinian feminist activist resistance to Israeli practices, we have a long history of analysis on this. The Israeli practices of blocking pregnant Palestinian women in labor at checkpoints from reaching medical facilities, denying Palestinians the right to bury their children, Israel's longstanding practice of holding captive Palestinian children's bodies in cemeteries or freezers also entails a form of psychological torture, leaving Palestinian family members to wonder, sometimes for decades, whether their child is even really dead. And we are seeing that now. And now in Gaza, as Palestinian Lama Roche recently wrote, pregnant Palestinian mothers are frantically running around the house, startled by sounds of missiles, wondering if their babies are still alive. And I won't even read the rest of the quote because it's just a lot to hold all of this talk all at once. Here, Israel targets mothering and...
Well, I just spilled a whole bunch of water all over myself. Hang on. Fuck. Everything's falling apart. Hang on. First thing I gotta do is get my desk cleaned up. God fucking damn it. Spilled my whole water. Hang on. Sorry. Spilled it all over myself. All over my goddamn desk. Hang on. All right. Here's what we're going to do. I have to step away to go get some paper towels and to put on a new pair of pants because my lap is now covered in water. I'm going to play this video and you guys are going to take good notes, okay? Take good notes. Yes, the electronics are safe. That was the #1 priority. Take good notes. I'll be right back.
And caregiving, positioning Palestinian mothers and caregivers in a dual struggle to protect themselves from the same state apparatus from which they are fighting to protect their loved ones. And as we have learned from Indigenous feminist scholars like Dion Millian, Luana Ross, Joanne Barker on Turtle Island about the settler colonial strategy of forced family separations, like the kidnapping of Indigenous children into residential schools. And we've also learned from Black feminist research on enslavement and policing from scholars like Andrea Ritchie, Dorothy Roberts, and Angela Davis, that the practice of separating family members from each other and people from their loved ones is a carceral and imperial strategy. In Palestine, Israeli settler colonialism depends on separating children from their parents and caregivers, denying mothers and caregivers the capacity, of course, with the border wall, Jewish-only roads, incarceration, displacement, but also Israel's long history of intentionally shooting and bombing children with the intention to kill, a strategy consolidated during the Second Intifada in 2000, which devastates mothering and caregiving. I mean, I guess in a way I was thinking about this before the talk, when we say like Palestine is a feminist issue, I still haven't figured out how to say this, but it might be flipped. It's not just that Palestine is a feminist issue, it's that we can't struggle to free Palestine without feminism. Meaning that these issues are integral to colonization. So if we're trying to work to end genocide and colonization, we can't ignore them. Beyond those children Israel has now killed, there are an unknown number of Palestinian women and children, including girls, who have gone missing. And that is right now in Gaza, the reports on this of children separated from their parents.
I'm back. Crisis averted. Crisis averted. My chair has a towel over it. Let's see. Did I miss anything? Palestinian. Oh, shit. Did I miss this? Okay, I need to rewind it. Okay. Fine. Palestinian is a friendly. Okay, let's go with there.
Of course, with the border wall, Jewish-only roads, incarceration, displacement, but also Israel's long history of intentionally shooting and bombing children with the intention to kill, a strategy consolidated during the Second Intifada in 2000, which devastates mothering and caregiving. I mean, I guess in a way I was thinking about this before the talk, when we say like Palestine is a feminist issue, I still haven't figured out how to say this, but it might be flipped. It's not just that Palestine is a feminist issue, it's that we can't struggle to free Palestine without feminism, meaning that these issues are integral to colonization. So if we're trying to work to end genocide and colonization, we can't ignore them. Beyond those children Israel has now killed, there are an unknown number of Palestinian women and children, including girls, who have gone missing. And that is right now in Gaza, the reports on this of children separated from their parents, as we know, so many people whose whereabouts remain unknown. And compounding all of this, Israel covers up these reproductive injustices through mother shaming, which scapegoats Palestinian mothers as if they are responsible for military violence and killing, to shift the gaze away from the Israeli state's horrific gender and sexualized violence. For example, in the Israeli Minister of Interior, Eilat Shaked, who openly called for the murder of Palestinian women because they give birth to little snakes. And historically, there's been a lot of analysis and documentation by Palestinian feminists on these racist depictions of Palestinian mothering in terms of like being bad mothers who throw their children out to the streets to die, mothers who raise terrorists, which echoes and mirrors what we see with the carceral system today in the United States, right, of blaming Black mothers for gun violence, et cetera. And now let's talk about homophobia and transphobia. Many of us are already familiar with pinkwashing, whereby how many of you are familiar with pinkwashing? Raise your hand.
Holy shit.
Okay, so since some of us aren't, I'll explain it. The Israeli state claims to be the only safe haven for LGBTQ people in the region, in contrast with Palestine, where it is implied is the most homophobic place on planet Earth. Pinkwashing, like colonial feminism, turns attention away from Israeli state violence and places it on savage Palestinian culture and religion, which also erases the existence of queer and trans Palestinians. As I speak, Israel and US pundits of pinkwashing are launching online campaigns promoting condemnation of Hamas's persecution of LGBTQ people in Gaza. In a racist analysis that can only address violence in the MENA region through abstract notions of culture and religion, like, the only explanation there is for any form of violence in the region is the culture or the religion. So these are like ahistorical Orientalist, ideas that give like this timeless explanation of violence, like they are violent because they are Arab or Muslim. So these campaigns, adopt that. They're crying out about how Hamas equals death for queer people while obscuring that rape and death are what Zionists are enacting on queers and women who stand with Palestine, as well as the historical and political realities of Israeli genocidal killing of Palestinians, including...
What? Someone needs to call the ADL on this bitch. I'm not even joking. Someone call the Groypers. I know you don't like the ADL, Groypers, and I agree with you. I agree with your position. but sometimes you have to use the master's tools against them. And if someone is not calling the ADL on this woman, I just don't know what world we live in. Holy shit!
Of violence. Like, they are violent because they are Arab or Muslim. So these campaigns,
Wait,
adopt.
Wait, are you serious? The president of the ADL follows you on Twitter? Stu. That's a great resource.
That they're crying out about how Hamas equals death for queer people, while obscuring that rape and death are what Zionists are enacting on queers and women who stand with Palestine.
Rape and death are what Zionists are enacting on women and queers who stand with Palestine. This presentation is everything. Stu Studio is our new god. He is our new hero.
As well as the historical and political realities of Israeli genocidal killing of Palestinians, including queer and trans people. In addition, by recruiting queer and trans Palestinians as poster children for its propaganda, or threatening to out them to their families if they do not collaborate with Israel as spies, this Israeli state further marginalizes queer Palestinians by equating queerness with collaboration and normalization, placing queerness outside the boundaries of a decolonized free Palestine. And on this topic of homophobic and transphobic colonial violence, these discourses trickle down into Zionist attacks on Palestinian and all Swana diasporas in the US who are Palestine activists. What we have seen is that women, but even more disproportionately, queer and trans activists, well, we are seeing so many people rising up right now against doxing, against criminalization, against repression of activism, the attacks on academic freedom on our campuses. A lot of us are working on that and talking about it and standing up against it, but we're not talking enough about the disproportionate impact, disproportionate danger that such doxing and repression has for queer and trans activists. And what I mean by that is that, these threats can be highly gendered and sexualized, and they're laced with homophobic and transphobic language, as well as calls for sexual violence and rape. But before I go on with that, I just want to put it out that, we used to say attack, these are, when someone says, oh, you're speaking up about Palestine, you're anti-Semitic, or you're, terrorist supporter, we used to call these attacks on free speech. But I think we need to change our language and refer to them as, I don't have a term yet, but we can discuss it. These are dangerous attacks. They're putting people into context of criminalization, of arrest, and even death. In Chicago, a 6-year-old boy was stabbed 26 times by his landlord inside of his apartment building for being Palestinian. So when you go out and you say, this person is a terrorist supporter, and you write it just on the internet, it can have a potentially, murderous effect, as well as criminalizing effect. So I think we need to, expand how we talk about this. So when we're talking about trans folks who are activists, I'll just give you some examples from some of my research, and also research that you can look all this up in websites like Palestine Legal, Center for Constitutional Rights. Someone will call a community center and say, is this the terrorist community center? And then I'm going to come rape you and give you a taste of your own medicine.
Oh, that's
so you
nice.
often have these calls to rape
nice.
integrated into the racist targeting. But now let's take it even further. When you have trans folks, for example, speaking out, queer folks who are visibly queer, you then will hear things like, you are a piece of trash. piece of feces, an anti-Semitic C word. You are disgusting. Go live in Palestine and let them kill you there. And many calls literally for death. These examples are the invisibilized in our own movements ways Israeli settler colonial violence extends into the criminalization of Palestine activism. Even well-intended can reinforce the gender binary in speaking up against racism. So that would be like the analyses that, you know, when people say, well, how is anti-Palestinian racism gendered? So they'll say, well, men are racialized as terrorists, criminals, agents of violence. Women are stereotyped as wearing hijab, abject, voiceless beings, extensions of the terrorist, sisters or daughters of the terrorist, like, you know, connected to terrorism. Or they're victims, you know, the veil, the whole thing of veil being symbol of a backwards culture and religion. So it's like the terrorist man and the veiled women. But we really need to be careful because even in challenging racism, from a feminist perspective, we can participate in the invisibilizing of trans experiences. And there are writings by trans Palestinians in the US saying that when they walk into a woman's bathroom, they get seen as a Palestinian man terrorist, and people are scared that they might be raped by them. You know, so these are all.
What do they look like when they walk into the women's bathroom and the women see a Palestinian male terrorist? That might be the first question. Like, why are they being perceived as a male Palestinian terrorist?
The kinds of anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab racism that are left out when we continue to do our activism through a gender binary. These stories teach us that policing Palestinian communities, just like in the colonization of the Americas, has depended on systematic policing and punishment of gender and sexual variance. And that colonization operates through a gender binary and a demand for gender conformity. So when we're talking about this doxing and repression, it's compounded. It is a form of criminalization and punishment, but it's also a criminalization and punishment of sexual and gender nonconformity, as sexual deviants who commit crimes against nature must be harshly punished, coupled with the necessity of the gender binary in facilitating the colonial expansion of Turtle Island and Palestine. So any movement committed to a free Palestine must take seriously how the categorical dichotomization of gender and sexuality is made material, is corporalized through violence, punishment, murder, and disappearance. And that the gender binary is foundational to colonization. And also that the gender binary, like all borders, are made possible through state violence.
The gender binary, like all borders, why do they consider the gender binary to be a border? Pop quiz. Why do they consider the gender binary to be the same as a border? They also said the gender binary is foundational to colonization, which of course it is, because capitalism created the gender binary, and capitalism is also what they do when they impose, when they colonize something, they impose the oppressive force of capitalism on the indigenous land. So it's basically the same thing. So the gender binary are the same as borders and are only made possible through state violence. Why did they say that, do you think? Tayton says, that shit didn't happen. I can't tell a Palestinian from a Lebanon person. Same with Europeans who's German or English. Yeah, I don't believe that actually happened either. But beside the point, let's see. Does anyone have any ideas? Why are they saying the gender binary like all borders? Why are they saying the gender binary is a border? It's really simple, guys. Why are they saying the gender binary is a border? Come on, you know this. This is really simple. You guys are overcomplicating it. It's really simple. Capitalism, which is defined as private property ownership, created the gender binary. You guys always get this confused. You're saying the gender binary upholds capitalism, but in fact, it's capitalism created the gender binary. Those are two really different things. Okay? Capitalism created the gender binary. Capitalism also created borders. That's why they're saying the gender binary is like borders are made possible through state violence. Because in order to maintain the gender binary, you need to have the oppressive force of capitalism opposed on the population, because the gender binary is a construct that came out of capitalism. And borders can also only be enforced as private property by the oppressive form of capitalism. That's what it is.
Colonization. And also that the gender binary, like all borders, are made possible through state violence. And the last section is on, we got the time? Anti-imperialist abolition. So with every escalation of US wars, whether we're talking about the post-9/11 war of terror or Genocide Joe's current war on Palestine, we witness
Genocide
an escalation in the racist, sexist policing and the militarization of the US border. So what I'm getting into now is a framework for thinking about
we're doing
the
it again.
interconnections between struggles here on Turtle Island and the struggle to free Palestine. And how to think about these as operating within the same like spatiotemporal location and same frame of violence.
I think you're new because I don't recognize your name. We deal with this every single presentation. This is not a unique observation. What you need to do is to put aside any debunking that you want to do, because it is going to be a complete and total waste of your time. You can say this till you're blue in the face, and it's going to make absolutely no difference. And I'm saying this to you to try to help you. If you care about solving this problem, what you need to do is stop debunking them and start listening to them to understand their perspective. What you just described is not their perspective. It's your perspective. They are winning. They are in the power position. Debunking them is not going to stop them. The only way you learn how to stop these people is by putting aside your perspective and understanding their perspective.
State violence and imperial violence. So the US supports Israel. So one way to think about that is also challenging us to move beyond thinking about why the US supports Israel. Because oftentimes it makes sense that it's has a lot to do with the US's imperial aim.
No. Do not pull this fucking shit on my stream. This is a disruption. This does not matter. And if you can't put your own fucking ego aside and listen to what's being done without whining and complaining about your perspective and your opinion in my chat, you're just going to be removed, bro. No. Do not pull this same bullshit that you do in every other fucking chat room in my chat room.
Its quote unquote forest policy interests in the MENA region, but it also supports Israel to maintain US systems of colonization, carcerality, policing of borders. So it's kind of like thinking about the strengthening of US global power
Yeah, I can tell it's the first time you've been here. I have 2 rules. Number 1, don't be a dick. I can do whatever I want because you're in my house. But you are in my house, and while you are in my house, you will not be a dick to me. You will not be a dick to my audience. That includes disrupting us. That includes ignoring the instructions that I'm giving you because you are in a college level class about socialism right now. If you don't like it, you don't have to be here. But rule number 2 is no whining. If I tell you to stop doing something, there is a reason that I'm telling you to stop doing it, so just stop doing it. Welcome. We hope you stick around and learn, but we don't do things here. It is not good to point out that they're wrong because it makes absolutely no difference, and every ounce of energy that you guys spend pointing out that they are wrong is an ounce of energy that you could spend on understanding them. If you want to waste your time, go ahead and waste your time. But you can do that somewhere else. See, and this is why conservatives will inevitably use, "You're nuts. We can't say what we want. Wah, 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 wah." This is why they always lose. So he's being an asshole, so he's going to get banned. And we're going to see if our other friend sticks around or not, but I'm going to guess probably not, but we're going to keep on going. And I promise you guys, the people that are complaining about not being able to debunk them in the chat and spending all their time owning the libs in the chat, the people who are complaining about that have absolutely no idea what's actually going on. Those are the types of people that listen to Libs of TikTok, that think that Libs of TikTok is real. Those are the type of people who get their news from the Daily Wire. Those are the types of people who are only and inevitably going to be disruptive. They have no idea what's going on because they don't have the discipline to sit down and actually listen. And when you tell them to shut the fuck up and actually listen, they start whining and crying and whining and crying and whining and crying, and then they disrupt everything, which is why I don't allow it. For people who are new, I don't allow that bullshit. Trendalin, thank you for being a member of the channel for 16 months. Love your content. Wish I could watch every day. New job is killing me. I'm sorry to hear that, Trendalin, but I'm glad you're here for the moment. All right. Everyone good? Yeah, Patrick, you're a good one. We like you, Patrick.
Depends on the strengthening of U.S. borders and U.S. carcerality within the United States. So I'm going to explain what I mean by that. So during this profoundly terrorizing moment of the Palestinian genocide, we need to acknowledge how the structures of incarceration, anti-migrant violence, and U.S. conquest have always gone hand in hand. So let's think about the concept of abolition that many of us now use and, might be mobilized by. Carceral systems in the U.S. emerge in the context of periods of colonial land settlement here. European colonists.
Carceral systems emerge in the context of periods of colonial land settlement. What does that mean? Carceral systems, this is a pop quiz for the chat. Carceral systems emerge in a context of periods of colonial land settlements, specifically for referring to European colonization. Yup, carceral systems are the police. Correct. What else does it mean? H-Tom in for the win. Prisons were created to protect private property. That's exactly right. Yeah, Indian reservations. That's actually a really good example. They locked people up to protect capitalism. They locked people up to protect private property. Jails are a product of capitalist slavery. Yup, carceral means prisons. Yup, this is correct. Capitalism created the prison and the police, correct? We're reporting these people to the ADL after this presentation, T-Bone Man. That's the state of affairs. Yup, the police are meant to protect the bourgeois. The police are meant to protect private property. The police equals slavery because they hunted slaves and returned them to the landowner. Forcing indigenous people out of their collective land ownership and privatizing it. Yep, that's where the Indian reservations come in. Well done. Yup, the police control those who resisted colonization. That's a really good point. The police do uphold whiteness. No, we don't trust the ADL for shit. Absolutely not. But sometimes if you have them, if you have T-Bone, if you have a state-funded college professor that is saying things like the Israelis are raping the Palestinian women to like keep them in line under settler colonialism, and saying that the Israeli military are raping the wives and sisters of Palestinians and making the Palestinians wash as a retribution. I'm just saying, I don't trust the ADL. I don't like the ADL. But if I can get the ADL to throw a massive hissy fit over this, sometimes you just gotta let them fight. You've got to let the bad people fight. Pit them against each other. Pit the ADL against the leftists. That's a win for us, right?
Of Turtle Island also necessitated securing borders to strengthen the power of the U.S. nation state. So what I'm trying to put together is securing of borders, carceral systems, and land settlement all reinforce each other. And we could just think of how the militarization of the police, for example.
See, bro, we're going to get along. It's cool. We're going to get along.
It's an outgrowth of the war on drugs, which was first declared by President Nixon and expanded by Reagan, and how the militarization of police was then propelled forward through the post-September 11th war on terror.
That's true enough.
That is when we started seeing an intensification of the militarization of the police. So that what I'm saying is that the U.S. used the war on terror to justify the militarization of police. So these histories, including how many U.S. cops are trained in Israel, helps explain why we are seeing SWAT teams evicting houseless mothers from homes where they were staying. This was, something I've written about in Oakland in 2020, where you had military grade, SWAT teams showing up to evict Black mothers from a place where they were staying with their kids, or military grade weapons used against protesters, or why a cop who arrested an Arab woman who wore hijab while she was driving pulled her over and said, "I just came back from crushing skulls in Iraq." Or why the Department of Homeland Security collected names of protesters during the 2020 protests around George Floyd. May he rest in peace. Feminist of color activists coming from an inner. So now what I'm going to do is talk about feminist of color activism that has probably been, I would say, at the fore.
See, I mean, this is what I'm saying. If we can cause a fight between the ADL and the radical revolutionary socialists, like, why wouldn't we take advantage of that opportunity? I mean, I just think I just think it makes sense. Those are like two sides of the evil coin focusing their attention on each other rather than focusing their attention on us.
Forefront of making these connections, especially because feminist of color activists tend to come from an intersectional perspective that's thinking about multiplicity of oppressions, and how different forms of oppression play out differently depending on the context. Many of you have studied in your classes, I'm guessing. So what I'm talking about here, I want to give some examples of social movements as a model that maybe we can look at and talk about that link struggles for immigration, related justice, decolonization of indigenous lands, Palestinian liberation, anti-war movements, and linking that and centering the struggle to end in one organizing space. I know that can sound overwhelming, like how do you build a movement that's doing all those things at once? But it can be done, and it's being done. So the analysis here then is that U.S. imperialism, well, I don't know, for time I might skip that whole definition. Okay, let's see. And I think I'll just skip this and go to that. This is not a new framework. It's been around for centuries. We can even go back to, the Black radical tradition was always an internationalist tradition and linked, abolition with, anti-imperialism. I'm even thinking in the 60s and 70s, Third World Women's Alliance, if you wanted to look into this, there's a huge history of feminist organizing, coalitionally connecting Palestine, Nicaragua, Black, Asian, Latinx, Indigenous struggles here together. So I'll give an example from a movement that I'm connected to called the Insight Movement. It connects, it's a coalitional feminist movement that, maybe refers to itself as like a movement of many movements. And it assumes that organizing against sexual and intimate violence against women and queer people of color means addressing the conditions that make that violence possible, or that sexual violence is a tool of war and empire, is then delivered at the hands of the military, the police, border patrol, prison guards, and schools. I've written on this with a co-author. So this comes from, I didn't just sit here and analyze a social movement for the purpose of this talk, but it's part of maybe a 10-year project. We're trying to, analyze this concept of anti-imperialist feminist abolition. And so some of that, just, in a couple notes on that would entail thinking about sexualized military violence related to, wars and carceral system and how they magnify each other. I could talk about that more if you want in a bit. I think I'll just close then with some reflections on, I was just trying to think if I should give any examples. I guess I could give one.
Hang on. This isn't, I know you're relatively new to watching this with me. This is what they do all the time. So this is not new. And as you get better at speaking socialist, you'll understand there are actually connections between the topics that she understands. I understand the connection she's making. You're still relatively new, and I don't say that as a put down or anything. I don't mean it like that, but just everyone starts somewhere. When you get better at speaking socialist, you'll just know the connection she's making. So they do exist. It just might not always be clear. And yes, she does believe every single thing that she's saying. Yes.
Example, because I was very abstract. If we think about, we think about activists, right, interested in ending war, anti-war activists. So they might go out and go, let's get people involved in our movement.
Hang on. Rottweiler says, how long until they start issuing a fatwa on people defiling the holiness of Floyd, just like the radical Muslims do when someone draws Muhammad? I don't think they're going to go that far, but I could be wrong. We'll see.
To end the genocide right now. Challenge, because you might only get people who show up who either have the capacity to work on that, or they might. So in other words, people who are working on other struggles like, police violence might not always have the capacity to take up another issue. So then you might end up with only certain types of people at the table. But if, let's say we were talking about, I'll give an example from the anti-war movement against the war in Iraq. In many feminist spaces, you would find that it would be Arab, Iranian, South Asian women at the table, feminists working to end the war in Iraq. And then we would say, well, why is it like this? And then we started talking about, we need to talk about how the war in Iraq is trickling down in the lives of communities of color in the US. So how do wars trickle down? They trickle down in many ways. We talked about militarization of the police as a recent phenomena, but also we could think about the resources, obviously, being taken from our schools and put into the military. We could think about times of intensified war are times also that inspire sexualized violence and domestic violence, all across the US. And then we could also think about military recruitment, right? Who gets recruited to the military? It's working class people of color. Who is positioned as fodder on the front lines of US wars? It's working class people of color. And then there's the question of sexualized violence in the military that disproportionately affects, women of color, queer and trans people of color more than anyone else. So these are all examples of how you could, talking about war as a issue affecting all of our communities. So then, for example, rather than coming up with like a campaign per se about the impact of the war in Iraq on people in Iraq, it would entail maybe coming up with a campaign around ending military recruitment in working class schools, right? As a way to broaden the movement and also take seriously, you know, the issues happening in our own backyard. And in a way, it's also an anti-imperialist strategy because it challenges. I mean, when you organize movements that separate the domestic and the global, you're reifying U.S. empire. So we can talk about that more if you want. So I'm going to close with a few new reflections that I'm writing for the Institute for Palestine Studies that are somewhat inspired by our colleague Rana Barakat, who has been challenging us all to stop focusing only on, you know, all the horrible things the U.S. and Israel have done, but also uplifting life and existence and perseverance and steadfastness and affirming life as part of a decolonial project. So as we envision a free Palestine, we can ask ourselves, what does sustaining life look like, even during genocide? And if we're not talking about that, you know, we're limiting our vision when it comes to, you know, if we're thinking of a free Palestine or dismantling the US or abolishing prisons, right? We're going to need to talk about what we want, what kind of world we want to build and start building it now. So I think these are some reflections.
T-Bone Man asks, are there some aspects of this actually big leaps? They're not, again, T-Bone Man, you're not listening. The reason you think these are big leaps of logic is because you are still new at this and you don't know how to speak the language yet. When you understand how to speak the language, you will understand that all of the concepts that she's talking about are fully and completely connected. So continuing to double down and say they're big leaps of logic, they're big leaps of logic, that's only going to get in your way of understanding this, bro. Because they're not big leaps of logic when you understand the language. And she knows this. She knows this. The other person sitting at the table knows this. Everyone in the room knows this. The only people who think that these are big leaps of logic are people who do not speak their language.
Of what I've gained from this, what I've learned about sustaining life since October 7th. And it is a reflection from practices I've learned from other people from the Swana region working together, including Maya, and how we've been mobilized by collective grief, rage, but also our innermost promise to love, sustain, and care for each other. And I've been calling this the psychic life of liberation as the communal form of knowledge and practice that activates us.
Psychic life
and it's an
of
unspoken
liberation?
Psychic life grounding us in the collective power of knowing that we are not alone and that we can and must depend on one another to survive. And as we mobilize, respond, and grieve.
She's talking about the collective consciousness, which they are going to confuse with collective care. But that's what she's saying when she's saying the psychic life of liberation is the collective consciousness.
We pick up the phone and we call each other. Amin, I heard you lost 23 family members in Gaza. May they rest in peace. Inshallah, I'll stop by later with a meal. Neda, if you're hurting too much, I'll deliver the posters to the rally for you today. How is your family in Jenin? We are here for you. We're here for anything. We understand the empire is crumbling and freeing Palestine can feel further and further away. But if we invoke the psychic life of liberation, even if it seems premature, optimism.
Wait, this is a really great tip. I saw Kyle in the chat giving a great tip as well. T-Bone, think of it as them stating think of it as them starting with the question, how to abolish capitalism. Capitalism being private property ownership, colonization, colonialization, imperialism, oppression, the patriarchy, etc., etc. Everything leads back to capitalism. No, this is not a new age group. This is a college class.
Mystic. It is through this invocation the stretching of language, that we reclaim the conditions of liberation's possibility. Liberation is not only a destination, it's an ongoing struggle. We must refuse to limit our visions and hopes for liberation and our futures to our reaction to Zionism. We must trace liberation's deep roots by reaching into the well of our inner communal resources, our collective histories and memories of caring for and committing to each other, even through the most violent, shocking, and gruesome atrocities. No end to fires we are forced to put out in every moment, on every campus, and everywhere right now. And these disproportionate attacks on women and our queer and trans siblings that are distinctly violent. But we are also feeding each other and reminding each other it's okay to not be okay. Don't forget to breathe and look up at the sky. We rage, we spiral, and come back to ourselves and each other. There's no respite from one part of the struggle while we attend to the other. I think I want to
Hang on. God Gamba says, I get the feeling when they speak of love, they are talking about something else. They are. Community love shouted is used to shut down dissent and protect the ears and the masses from troubling thoughts. What they're talking about when they say love is being in comradeship with one another. Like, I mean, it's kind of like, okay, think about like 1984, right? In 1984, you had the inner party, you had the outer party, and then you had the proles, right? The comrades, the family of choice were all in the party, and some of them were higher ranking than others, and that's just the way that goes. But that's what they're speaking about. They're speaking about comradeship. They're speaking about community care. They're speaking about being part of the collective. Yes, my dog is having a field day right now. She's upset at something. I don't know what it is, and I'm not going to go look. But love is being a good comrade. Love is being in solidarity. Love is taking care of the other comrades, putting the collective above themselves. That's what they're speaking to.
I just wrap this up with affirming that fighting and working to keep people alive and persevere during genocide is revolutionary.
Hang on. My dog is not a poor doggo. My dog is a Chihuahua, and she was just uppity at something. It was probably a squirrel that ran across the road or something. My dog is fine.
And it's a refusal of the colonial language that disappears our truths in order to disappear our people. Our diasporic movements against colonization and genocide are movements for those we love, who remain alive, who we attend to. We are pledging to comfort each other in the face of brutal atrocity and abandonment. This psychic life of liberation is the embodiment of our communal languages, our intergenerational sentiments and commitments that we depend on to keep going, to stand in kinship with each other, to reach for each other for sustenance, for the strength to continue caring for one another while interrupting everything. These are insufferable times, and we cannot participate in business as usual. We must protect the psychic life of our liberation and all those who nourish and sustain it, while boldly and unapologetically backing our Palestinian, feminist, queer, and trans comrades as part of our commitment to stopping the genocide.
Comrades!
Love and care is proof of
comrades. They really do call each other comrades. Our Palestinian, feminist, queer, and trans comrades.
Apologetically backing our Palestinian, feminist, queer, and trans comrades as part of our commitment to stopping the genocide. Love and care is proof of our existence, our lives, our perseverance, and our future. To be sure, feminist and queer visions towards building towards a world without police, prisons, and war is a heart struggle and a process where over time we learn and remember the skills for living better in better and increasing harmony with one another and all life on the path to growing the irrelevance of coloniality and carcerality and ending violence. Thank you.
Now we're getting into the Q&A, hopefully, or discussion. This is a really good presentation, though. I appreciate Stu so much.
I walked in and that did not help my tears.
Did she start crying? She's crying?
Nadine,
Wow.
Dr. Nadine was referring towards the end actually to, we have a practice on a big chat where we share pictures of the sky with each other from all around the world where we are. And it is incredibly moving to and important to remember that we are all under the same sky. In Palestine, California, New Jersey. I think we had one from Germany.
Yeah.
Where was it?
I don't know. Europe,
Serbia?
Princeton. I don't know.
Serbia.
Yeah.
And it is sometimes when we don't have words, we'll just share a picture of the sky. So thank you, Nadine. So I have a few prepared questions to move us to a different register, and maybe we'll do a couple and then open, because I think really this is a good space to just be together and think about the world we want and the world we don't want. So I'll ask sort of two questions that are around that. The first is on anti-imperialism. So in your talk today, you centered the United States, US imperialism, and US settler imperialism. Now, for sure, the United States is the most powerful imperial actor in the Middle East.
Wait. See, I was about to dismiss this because the only things that I really watch are primary source video evidence of like what's going on now. And so anytime someone tells me to watch a documentary, I'm kind of like, okay, that's nice. I appreciate the thought. I really do. It's just not the type of thing that I normally like watch or engage in. But go see Community Love in Action. They start murdering each other during struggle sessions. I think I would very much enjoy watching that. Does anyone else want to watch Japanese struggle sessions where they start to murder each other? I think this sounds like a great idea.
East and North Africa. But there are other minor key actors with expansionist geopolitical goals also acting in the region, many of whom also work on this access and work on that intersection of gender, sex, political difference, the body, and availability for violence. Here I'm referring to the geopolitical expansionist goals of Iran, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. Some of these are, of course, allied to US empire, but others are not, and together they all manage the Middle East, or they manage each other's ambitions in the Middle East. What does a feminist approach to anti-imperialism look like when we think from the Middle East and all of these intersecting, some more minor than other, geopolitical goals for power, for extension, and extension through, in many ways, a focus on the body and a focus on the gendered body? And here I'm thinking all three, right? Turkey, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and Iran. Second is on abolition, and I'll ask these two together. Palestine is, the carcerality is an important structure of occupation and settlement. And you can think of just the sort of statistic
Carceral means
that
prison.
40% of all Palestinian men have spent time in Israeli prisons. But obviously, refugee camps,
Come on, sound.
status of
There you go.
Lebanese citizenship is a carceral structure towards Palestinian refugees. So, and you already addressed this a little bit, but does abolition require the abolition of borders? And if so, how can we think of Palestine as a model,
Good to know, Stu.
not for the world that we don't want, but for the future that we do want?
What?
A model for how to construct political society away from these sort of carceral structures and the heteropatriarchal tying of political difference to models of kinship.
Kinship means family, nuclear family. Anytime they talk about models of kinship, that's abolish the family.
Things we've also talked about. So let's do those and then,
Yeah.
or you want to open it up? How do you want to do this? How do people feel?
Maybe
Wanna just
we
open
hear
it
what
up?
people say since they might have a question.
Yes.
That I could at least write it down before they forget.
Ah, good idea. Okay.
But
Usually we have like little
What do
note
you think?
cards,
Oh, yeah.
but we don't now. So
No, I'll ask. But I mean,
I
ask
want to
more
watch
of
the
a
murder
question than
part.
my last question.
I just want to watch that.
Because the other thing, like, when you're saying about borders, I mean, it's like, I'm always thinking about the nation. And I was thinking about this in relationship to two things. One is like the relation of the nation to natality. I mean, the definition of the nation is always tied to reproduction, you know, so embedded in that is both certain kinds of gender opposition, certain kinds of assumptions about kinship structures. But also then when you were saying about like the internationalism of different kinds of liberation struggles, which seems to be the other side of it, it's like, well, if in order to get out of that particular nexus, is it necessary to, or is it advantageous to think from some space beyond the nation? And so when you were just asking that question about, you know, is Palestine a model or is it, I mean, I don't know if it's a model, but, you know, it seems to raise the, I mean, for me, it really raises the question, not just the implicit and explicit violence that subtends the nation, you know, but like, what other forms can we imagine that are more about affirming life, you know, and all of the registers that means? Because I think that seemed to be like implicit in a lot
Yeah.
of what you were asking.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
let's take another. Mustafa, can
Got
you
that
have
queued
ask a
up. Thank
question?
you.
Yeah.
For me, as like a student organizer,
Yeah.
I guess my question would be, what advice would you have for like, especially on-campus organizer of like kind of incorporating this, so this stupid like framework within our work, of course, like.
I love that. That's so great.
So stunning, so brave,
One more.
so beautiful.
So kind of in a similar region, in terms of on-campus organizing, I feel like I've seen as
You're doing a
this
great
count
job,
as
T-Bone. Don't worry
the
about it.
conflict or sorry, the genocide has gone on. It's been a more female-dominated space in terms of activism, and I honestly don't understand why.
We know why.
We know.
It's very specific topic, but in general, it's not.
Getting money.
I can give you reasons.
Thanks so much. That's really great that you asked that.
It's
really important,
Take
yeah.
those.
Yeah.
So I was,
I'm sure. Sorry, I'm so sorry.
no, go ahead.
No, no,
Oh, we were just talking like how I agree with it.
When you started speaking, I started thinking about the emotional part of it, and I didn't know how to articulate it, and I didn't know how we were dealing with it while we were talking, right? And I waited until the end when you gave me something. And that something is extremely important. I watched a movie with my student yesterday, and I left the room 3 times because I couldn't handle it. And then the 4th time I said, there is no point for me leaving. I'm going to stay here and just talk, which I did. So what I'm saying is that the last part of your talk in which you were talking about the psychic of how did you call it? Because this is extremely important.
Psychic life of liberation.
Psychic life of liberation is a really a great like pathway to take when we are thinking about how do we feel while we are talking about actually the killing, the mass killing of anybody, but our people in particular, that has been going on for decades now, at least
Yeah.
since we were alive, like, right, my generation.
Oh, thank you, Angel Eyes. Appreciate it.
The second thought I had is, why don't you break down the term like U.S. imperialism? Because it hides much more And one of the things that is hiding is capitalism.
Yeah.
Because we know that what's happening in Gaza
Capitalism!
now is really about dispossession.
Oh. One of the things that they're saying, so that terms like us like imperialism because it hides things, and one of the things it hides is capitalism. Hang on.
The term like US imperialism, because it hides much more. And one of the things that is hiding is capitalism.
Yeah.
Because we know that what's
Yeah.
happening in Gaza now
Exactly.
is really about dispossession, is about building new things, is about like the real estate event that will taking place in like,
Exactly.
the
Well, all
waterfront.
imperialism.
And I think this is crucially
really
important instead of speaking about its imperialism
Yeah.
thing, but like name the beast.
Yeah,
because
that's right.
There's like capitalism there. And one of the most important moments of this deployment of the army did take place before 9/11 in the United States, and it was during the Seattle protests in 1999 against the meeting of the WTO. And that's the moment in which we saw multiple groups and multiple forces getting together to fight that thing, feminist, environmentalist. And I was thinking, which is something I shared with my own students, is that 9/11 was the event that put to rest that global movement of fighting, struggling, and fighting back against capitalism. It was 9/11 and
Wait, what? The global movement of fighting and struggling against capitalism was 9/11? What does that mean? We'll listen to that again in a second. Naruto, thank you for the super chat. A couple days ago, Israel also bombed a caravan filled with aid workers 3 times. Their excuse was, we suspect that a Hamas fighter was among them. Well, that sounds pretty typical of Israel to me. Thank you, Naruto. I want to listen to that again.
that put to rest that global movement of fighting, struggling, and fighting back against capitalism. It was 9/11 and reframing of it as terrorism and the war on terrorism. So nobody is talking about capitalism. Everybody is talking about the war on terrorism. So this connection of
Okay. What she's saying is that there was a fight against capitalism going on prior to 9/11, and then 9/11 happened, and they were able to reframe the entire political narrative about terrorism rather than fighting against capitalism. That's what she just said. Yo, Benjamin Jackson in with the big 20 memberships. Thank you, Benjamin Jackson. That's awesome. Congratulations to everyone who got a membership. That's great. We got some gifts from Angel Eyes, gifts from Benjamin. You guys are the best. Thank you.
They are extremely important. The last thing I want to say is, how do you speak as an environmentalist without thinking about the war and without thinking about making spaces inhabitable to their residents? That's also another dimension of this liberation that we are seeking. Thank you.
That was so great. Yeah, to your point about imperialism, I completely agree. I actually, that was the part that I said I'm going to skip. It was right when I was defining imperialism. And I've written a lot on the interconnection between the systems on the import-export approach to like carcerality, to the technologies of war and empire, like Israel testing these technologies before selling them all across the world, and how that's essential to what we're seeing now. So I appreciate you saying that. Yeah.
So my name is Will Vargas. I'm a community-based counselor at our counseling center here in New Brunswick. And thank you so much for not only sharing of your wisdom and your knowledge and the lived experiences of those who are, right? And so for me, what is coming up as a mental health practitioner is the fact that the medical and the mental health systems are all—
Hang on. Patrick, I have an answer to this over on my Substack. I wrote an article that talks about the answer to the question of who is the actual leader in the socialist movement. You can find more information there. I'll give you the too long didn't read. Socialists are not individualists. That means there is not one individual leader. There never has been one individual leader. People might know Karl Marx's name more than other names, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't more than one leader. That's just that you know Karl Marx's name more. That might actually be from conservatives that you know Karl Marx's name more than it actually is from them, because how socialists think of things is they are part of a collective. So there is not one leader. It's kind of, again, it's like in 1984. There's the inner party and the outer party. There are a number of inner party members. The inner party sets the agenda. They're academics, they're authors, they're high-level activists that have been very successful. They do have organizations that are bigger than others. They have people who coordinate communication across different groups. But there are all sorts of different levels of leaders, which makes sense when you think about the fact that they are not individualists, they're collectivists. And if one leader starts screwing up, or one leader starts to go off the reservation, all of a sudden that person isn't going to be a leader anymore, because socialists see people as just cogs in the machine. And if a cog in the machine breaks down, they can switch out the cog and just replace it with another cog. Hope that makes sense.
Cultures are connected with the systems of oppression. Not only pathologizing, but medicalizing disability along with, right, the medication industry. And so part of what I'm hoping and yearning for is that indigenous form of wellness and practice, because none of those things.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that. I was thinking when Zakia was talking about how it is a colonial and capitalist, racial capitalist approach to, separate mind from body, body from land, people from land, humans from non-humans, And so part of uplifting the psychic life of liberation is a move, is a decolonial, hopefully, move to reclaim our own approach to thinking about the significance of...
No. This is not true. This is not true, guys. What you guys are talking about in the chat, you are making the same mistake that the conservatives always make, in that you are looking at people who write academic papers in academic journals, and you think those are the leaders of the left. I watch leftist events all the time. I watch socialist events all the time. No one's talking about Fanon. No one's talking about him. Do you know who's talking about Fanon? Conservatives. James Lindsay. This all started with James Lindsay cherry picking a paper saying that decolonization is inherently a violent revolution, which, by the way, that's not even true. Decolonization happens non-violently all day, every day. Non-violent decolonization is actually far more dangerous than violent decolonization right now. Non-violent decolonization is what's going on in New York, where they're trying to do a land grab right now that is very similar to what happened in Seattle with the Chaz or the CHOP back in 2020. So James Lindsay cherry-picked one paper from this guy, and he started peddling it around the internet as though it was the only gospel truth that mattered. And then all the conservatives start talking about this guy because, oh, James Lindsay's talking about him. It must be something that leftists are talking about. No. I have not heard one single socialist since James Lindsay started talking about this paper months ago. We have not heard one single socialist talk about Fanon. Not one. So, no. And I understand why you think that. So I'm not trying to make you feel bad or anything. I'm really not. We're starting to become friends. You've already got some good insights. Like, we're going to be cool. But like, people have got to stop believing that people who wrote academic papers that are being talked about by conservatives are the leaders on the left. Because they're not. They're just not. Stu, you say you have a Fanon example? I would love to see it. It would be the first one that I've seen.
The emotive of the psyche, ancestral wisdoms and intergenerational trauma as all part of what we're resisting and what we're building. And how, I mean, I'll try not to, I won't go into it too much. Maybe I'll think a little bit more before I respond on that. Yeah. So thanks. I really appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like our sensibilities, you know, our ways of being, you know, that we're not just, it goes back to moving us beyond a react.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to find that because I've looked for it. I looked for presentations about decolonization. We watched the presentations about decolonization that I found, and they don't mention Fanon. So I don't think we're going to find that. That is a James Lindsay fantasy. The closest thing to leaders are all the professors in academia, library associations, teachers unions, creating activists. Well, I think, yes, I would say that some professors are considered to be their leaders, some like high-level academics that they've known and been around for a while. I would say that those the professors that they consider to be leaders, though, are also engaging as activists. They're engaging as organizers. They're out there actually doing things. I mean, I've said this a million times. The rock stars on the left are the activists. The activists are literally famous. They have brands. They are like, they take pictures with them. They treat them like rock stars at their conference. So those are who the leaders are, the people that everyone admires, everyone's looking at, everyone's talking about. These are the people that are coordinating communication across different types of groups so that the different groups know what the other groups are doing. I do agree with you. Academics fall into that. They're also authors. They love books. They love authors. They do everything around the publishing industry and the training industry and the education industry. So like authors that have written a lot of books, they're considered to be like rock stars. Yeah. Angela Davis has massive street cred. That's why they talk about her all the time.
Active mode, and towards uplifting who we are, who we've been, and who we want to be and where we want to go, which would be integrative, collective, communal, intergenerational, ancestral. And that I was thinking about this new book that came out, The Land in Our Bones.
The
And
land
it's
in our
interesting
bones.
because I read the book before it was published, and it's taken on a new meaning after it was written before October 7th. But, you know, it's a book that I think, you know, many people are going to be grabbing onto because it does just what we're talking about around around these questions of, yeah. So on other contexts of imperialism.
You don't have to, I mean,
Yeah.
this sounds much more interesting. Conversation we're having.
Online.
Well, actually,
Yeah,
let me,
that's right. That's right.
Yes, we have.
let me get this super chat from Tayton. Tayton, thank you for the super chat. The day will come when one individual does no. Tayton. I'm quite frankly shocked to see this coming from you. That's just not true, bro. That's not true. You're thinking like a conservative here. Conservatives think in terms of hierarchy. These people think in terms of just like one big linear line. There might be some people who are more high profile than others, but that doesn't mean they're the only individual. That hasn't even been true in other time periods where they have had high profile people. When Stalin was the big gun, Trotsky was still alive. He was still a leader to some people that hated Stalin. So there wasn't even one then. Marx didn't do his thing by himself. He wrote the Communist Manifesto with Engels. You know, there's always more than one. They're a collective. They do not look at things in that way. I'm really shocked. Tayton, I know we had a couple days off, bro, but come on.
We have
People
no questions.
online. No questions.
Appreciate the super chat.
I mean, I'm
though. Thank you.
especially interested in, the organizing happening on
Mhm.
campus. So we could also just shift to like an organizing discussion. If students or faculty want to talk through these questions,
Mm.
should we start with that? Like to me, the feminist question in organizing is kind of what I was saying in the beginning, that if we could think of a different framing than like Palestine is a feminist issue, what the limitation of that framework is that it implies that in addition to being, an issue of decolonization or an issue of health or environment, it's also a feminist issue, and that's not what it is. It's that, it's that colonization depends on homophobia, transphobia, and sexualized violence. And basically depends on heteropatriarchy. Like there would be no colonialism, there would be no Zionism without heteropatriarchy.
No
What?
nation. Yeah.
No nation. And therefore, if you are,
There would be no colonialism. There would be no Zionism. There would be no nations without heteropatriarchy. Why is that? Because heteropatriarchy was created by capitalism.
transphobia and sexualized violence. And basically depends on heteropatriarchy. Like there would be no colonialism, there would be no Zionism without heteropatriarchy.
No nation. Yeah.
No nation. And therefore, if you are
You're good,
striving
MP.
for a free Palestine and you ignore that, you're like missing a central component of how Zionism operates. So it's kind of
Yo! If you ignore if you are striving for a free Palestine and you ignore the heteropatriarchy, which means capitalism, you're missing a key component of how Zionism operates. Zionism in this case also means capitalism. I hope people understand that, right? Zionism stands for Israel, the settler colonialists, the capitalist oppressors, the bourgeois, the ones who privatize the land, the ones who are imprisoning the Palestinians. Everyone gets that, right? Oh yeah, they definitely see Zionism as colonialism. 100%.
Palestine and you ignore that, you're like missing a central component of how Zionism operates. So it's kind of like saying that people who are not bringing a feminist lens are, have a limited, that's not going to get us free. And it's certainly not going to get all of us free. And I think it's important to distinguish between two thoughts that both are central. One is that, so if we say Zionism depends on heteropatriarchy, that is relevant to everybody who wants to dismantle Zionism, right? It's like saying, anyone who is working to free Palestine needs to tackle the sexist, heteronormative demands or structures of colonization, right? Like you need to tackle all those things if you want it to be dismantled. But only doing that ignores the people and the bodies that are differently impacted by, the sexist and homophobic Israeli state. And what I mean by that is it's not enough to just do the former, because we simultaneously have to then
ADL?
look at how these things
ADL?
are actually playing out materially. And when you do that, then you find that the example that I gave about the trans folks who are getting the most dangerous, harmful forms of violence. And then if you do that, then you realize we're going to need our organizing to center queer and trans people and women. Not only because they're especially vulnerable to colonial violence and the racism and the doxing, but they also embody exceptionally nuanced wisdom about Zionism because they are living it in all of its complexity. So those are the people we should be turning.
Bro, these are not progressives. These are socialists. If you think those are the same thing, then you need to stick around and listen and learn.
To for the analysis to be leading this movement. And to clarify a little bit of what I said, the first point about you can't have a free Palestine movement without a feminist and queer politics, that point or that analysis of how Zionism works, that point is kind of like maybe a Palestinian or Swana like lens or reading or analysis of how Zionism works. Like if you have a queer lens, this is how you're going to see Zionism. You're going to see it in all of its complexity. So that's one thing, is the lens like that we bring, our analysis that we bring to our movement. And then the other one isn't about your lens. It's about, who are we accountable to? Who are the people, the bodies, the experiences, the survivors, And so those are like two different things. And the reason I'm stressing that is because in academia, sometimes we get caught up in the first one. When we have like a queer politics, it just becomes like a reading practice or
a queer
a way
politics.
of seeing the world, as if like we're going to begin and end with analyzing the state through a queer lens.
I'm seeing an awful
But I'm
lot of
saying that we need
debunking
to
in my chat, and I don't like it.
do more.
I think there's definitely, if I can just jump in, it is definite so two things. First, I think a lot of us have experienced, a lot of us who are queer or who are women have experienced this kind of, I don't want to, I don't know, it's almost like it's a homophobic recitation of homophobic violence and its spectacularity. So I've been at protests where I'm then told, don't you know what Hamas would do to you?
Yeah.
Right? If you were in Palestine. And we have to start naming this actually as homophobic, right? Like you cannot rehearse violence to queer people and be like, don't you know, you would be.
What they're saying, for everyone who kept trying to debunk them in the chat, which is why I tell you to stop debunking them, because you're only doing it to make yourself feel morally superior. It serves no other purpose. If you hadn't been saying, well, queer people are going to get murdered in Palestine and meh, you would have perhaps understood that the argument that they're making is that constantly saying queer people are going to get murdered in Palestine is homophobic because you are threatening them with violence for their political beliefs. That is the argument being made. If all you're doing is trying to debunk them, which, by the way, Queers for Palestine is a reference to the idea that no one is free as long as capitalism exists everywhere in the world. As a reminder, queer is not a sexual identity. Queer is not about being gay. Queer is not about being trans. Queer is a far left political ideology. This is why I tell you to stop debunking them. Because there is a logic to what they are arguing, and if you do not understand what their perspective is, regardless of whether or not you agree with it, then you can never beat them. If you do not understand them, you will not beat them. So stop debunking. Start listening.
You take, and really excruciating detail. I think we have to
Yeah.
actually shift it.
It's violent.
It's homophobic, it's violent,
Homophobic.
and we have to move it from thinking only in terms of pinkwashing to
Yeah.
actually and understanding pinkwashing as a form of homophobia.
Yeah.
Actually, as
Yeah.
a sort of
In the erasure and positioning like queer people as like abject beings, as lacking, like that you don't have your own knowledge that
Mhm.
we're going to tell.
That's part of it, but also I think just this sort of fantasy of certain kinds of violence, of certain kinds of homophobic violence, and then
I
the
see, I see.
recitation of this
I see,
of this
the fantasy.
fantasy, and at the same time, pinkwashing tells queer people like you can only care about queer issues. That's the only thing you care about. That's the only thing you
single
are,
issue.
right? And it fantasizes a kind of queer Arab subject, and I'm saying Arab here because pinkwashing is actually used across the region, right? The only kind of, it imagines a kind of queer person that can be uprooted without being severed, without experiencing that kind of uprooting as a kind of severing from your social structures. But I really appreciated what you said about wisdom, right? Like the knowledge of actual queer politics and queer activism, just to give an example of that. Up until October 6th, I was in a huge organizing with a group of queer activists in Lebanon against a queer crackdown that was happening in Lebanon. And then immediately October 8th, it shifted to mutual aid order in Lebanon. 100,000 people now have been displaced. And that is just the kind of flexible knowledge that we have as organizing, and the way to organize actually away from the state, because we've always understood the state as being highly invested in us not existing.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that you brought that in. And, I would say just part of that to the question of how we reframe the language that we're given is to understand pinkwashing as this form of violence, as a form of homophobic violence. And then part of that is to think about the politics of how we do politics. So it's absolutely right that women and queer people have taken on the burden or have done more labor organizing. That is definitely true on this campus. It's true on many, I would say it's probably true on most campuses. But I think that then becomes the opportunity for just thinking about gendered. So it's an opening to realize that it's actually not just on this issue. It just is. When it comes to social justice work, it is a gendered labor division. And that then as working on social justice has to address the politics of how we do politics. Anyway, so
Yeah.
other rounds.
I mean, I have a lot to say about the gender and the organizing. I mean, there's a gendered logic that, especially in like diaspora communities, Noura knows because we've talked about this for so many years. I did write a book about this. Thanks.
Okay, guys, just to do a quick time check, there's about 15 minutes of this presentation left. I just want to remind my supporter community that we will be doing a supporter call today at 8 p.m. That starts in 25 minutes. So we're going to get through the next 15 minutes of this. I'm going to try to keep comments to an absolute minimum to make sure we end on time. But we will be doing a supporter Zoom at 8 p.m. tonight. That's going to be available to people who have subscribed as a supporter on the Substack, Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. You can find the link to that in the Unwoke Roundup email. I will also be sending out the link to my locals community. I appreciate you guys supporting me. I know I had to cancel our supporter calls this week because I was traveling. So we will be doing a little bit of a makeup one tonight at 8 p.m. If you want to come and join us, please come and do so.
Which is around I mean, really, I wrote a book about this. So and I have a chapter on Palestine organizing and sexism.
Mhm.
So like, you know, if you want to read it, it would be useful. Or it like, I think not, I'm not going to say it's useful, but it validates what, you know, what people experience, I think, in their organizing. It's called Arab America and it's chapter 4.
I shouldn't, I have the PDF.
Oh my God.
So if anyone, I can.
But I think there's layers to this question,
But you're
right?
supposed to buy the
There's one. No, you don't have to buy the book. These days, you know, don't buy the book. I'll even send you a PDF. So the idea is that in diaspora communities, women become positioned as bearers of culture, of, you know, for future generations, for the community to like, you know, maintain its identity in the diaspora, you know, just to say it briefly. And then that plays out in organizing spaces because sometimes men are sort of, you know, raised to have more capacity to exist far beyond their own communities. Whereas, and this is very like gender binary, I'm being really like reductive right now, but just to get the point across, to be closer to home. You know, the whole like women will become mothers and pass on the language to their children. And that's how we're going to maintain our language in the US and all that. And so that is one factor, you know, to consider. And there are many other factors, but I think a huge one, which actually I was going to say in response to your anti-imperialism, your imperialism question is that when the dominant discourse used against us is that we are the most sexist and homophobic people in the world, it becomes impossible to speak up about sexism and homophobia and transphobia in our communities. So it does not help the issue of how much pain, violence, devaluing, exhaustion, triple, quadruple levels of labor compared to cis men in our movements that women and queer organizers endure. It does not help that it's nearly impossible to talk about it.
Mhm.
So one reason it's difficult to talk about is what I said, that if, you know, and I wrote about this, Noda knows, you know, we worked on this together, that if you were to say, I'm experiencing sexism in the SJP, right? It would be like, oh, there go those Palestinians again, you know, silencing women in their communities. So then no one's going to say it, you know? Or if you do say it, then you get a traitor for collaborating with Zionism, for being, you know,
Wow.
or for dividing the movement,
Mhm.
which we know from all the feminist color movements in the US historically, which goes back to the civil rights movement and all the research on that. That, you know, single issue or all the liberation movements, right? Liberation first, and then we talk about other issues. And I can add another layer.
Have a good
which
one,
is
Rottweiler. See you tomorrow.
The idea that nothing happening in the diaspora matters when people are dying in Palestine.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, how dare you mention anything when, you know, people are being killed and we just need to fight, even if that fight is super inequitable and unjust and even violent and even entails sexualized violence against women organizers. So I think all of these things can be useful for a discussion and to think about, okay, how do you talk about sexism without reinforcing Arab bashing, Islamophobia, you know, anti-Palestinian racism? Yeah. I mean, I just think also like, so that was more like big analysis, but then just on a basic like labor point, I'm happy you just asked the question because, and anyone else could chime in. I mean, like, let's just be real about what we're talking about. We're talking about this huge, division of labor issue, gender division of labor issue that's not only, which would already be so unjust, like women, and this is what is happening right now, I think. It's not the age-old gender division of labor issue where women are like cooking the food for the movement and men are like at the microphone, or women are being left out of decisions and men are having discussions behind closed doors and all the decisions have already been made.
Yeah, Kyle, I really understand that Stu and that one video is reinforcing all of your favorite James Lindsay talking points. I really do get it. But bro, I've been listening to content from a far greater range of activists for months and months and months, and none of them are mentioning Fannin. So if there is one single video where they're discussing him, that's all fine, well, and good. But please do not make the assumption that one single video in a much greater context is going to make any difference in my analysis at all. That Fannin is someone that James Lindsay cherry-picked in order to advance a narrative that he wanted to sell people that is not actually a leading figure of influence on the left because they never talk about him.
All those things are still happening. But on top of it, it's that women and queer organizers are also doing the analysis and at the microphone and writing, right? So you just have this like compounded forms of labor that are completely unsustainable. And so I think it's a question of like, supporting. How do we build movements where people are supported and no one is, it's not taken for granted that some people are just good at it or some people are better at multitasking, which is super gendered. And then everyone just sits back and I mean, I could just go on and on. I mean, the most annoying thing to me is, is the, let's just make a list. We're going to spend the whole time asking, critiquing a plan, but not working on the plan. And I'll do a game. How many of you have experienced? Raise your hand. Number 2 is some people with privilege not paying attention to the work that's happening because they're just maybe taking a break while other people are paying attention. And then those privileged people show up and start asking about what they missed.
Yeah.
And then the people doing all the work have to then explain what's happening. How many of you experienced that? We're like, what time is the event? Right? And it's like, even that mere question, it might seem so benign, but in this moment to have to respond to a text and tell someone that the event's at 5:30 is a form of violence, in my opinion.
What?
Or being asked, and this is something myself and others have experienced on campus.
Listen. I agree that when someone asks you a question that they could very easily answer on their own without bothering you with it, that you've already answered 15 ways from Sunday, I agree that's annoying, but sending a text message saying the event's at 5 p.m. is not a form of violence. Or being asked to do that is also not a form of violence.
That because we are Arab or Palestinian or Lebanese, that it's this weird thing where first they're like, no, you just know better.
Yeah.
Like
yes,
you're
I
the
don't wanna
right
step on your
person.
toes.
You're the one who, but at the same time, first it's a lot of time. It takes out so much, but it's also the person who would be the most vulnerable saying the same thing that other person who's like, no, you're the right person. You know? So that's something we were also experiencing. I mean, also faculty experienced this. I've experienced this definitely as just say it. Yeah.
And to the point of like, how do you talk about these things? Like, can you imagine if we just said, let's organize a teach-in on Zoom on sexism in the movement? Like the Zionists, it would be like the best day of their lives. You know, they would just be all over saying how like sexist we are, you know?
I think you could even tie in the fact that like this labor is unpaid. Which would make me want to see a lot of like men not doing it. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Volunteer, like women do charity work. For sure.
Kyle, as I said, I am open to looking at anything. However, the point is that once you start talking about Fanon, because James Lindsay has cherry-picked one single paper with a couple of convenient sentences and has blasted that all over conservative influencer sphere, I can't talk about Fanon now because everyone on the right thinks that Fanon is all the left talks about and how they view the world when it's not true. And I know that because I watched a metric ton of stuff related to this issue when it all first started. And none of them were talking about Fanon. None of them. So I'm not saying that it's not something that I think is a personally interesting little tidbit nugget of information. What I am saying is that because of the irresponsibility of conservative influencers not thinking about the impact of what they're doing, now everyone believes that this is the one big thing that everyone's talking about when it's not true. That is my point. And the minute that I show one Fanon video, it all becomes about that and not about the other countless forms of decolonization that have nothing to do with violent revolution. The conservative right is convinced that the only form of decolonization that they need to worry about is violent revolution, when in fact, decolonization is happening around them all the time. And they have no idea because the only definition they've been given is Fanon's definition from fucking James Lindsay, who swore to them, pinky swear, trust me, bro, that violent revolution is the only form of decolonization that exists. That is what I am trying to explain to you. That's what I've been trying to explain to you for the last half hour. That if no one else wants to act like a responsible goddamn adult in this scenario, God knows James Lindsay's not doing it, then I will fucking do it. I am not jumping on the Fanon fucking bandwagon because the socialist left is by and large not talking about him.
Sure. It's not seen as important.
So I feel like with like a lot of these lists that
These lists.
Burnout obviously comes out, and I guess my question would be if you had like any advice on how to like deal with that burnout, because you know, as a, like, and especially in a movement like ours, it's continuously going.
Yeah.
And so we continuously have to keep going. And so constantly being burnt out is kind of hard.
You
I was wondering if
You don't ever have to feel bad about asking questions. The problem right tonight, Kyle, is just that we have a time constraint, but don't feel ever bad about asking questions. I want new people to ask questions.
you would have like any advice on how to deal with that.
Let's do it.
Question. One thing that we're experiencing is that, well, one, people are individually getting burned out, but we're kind of taking turns getting so burned out that we can't do anything.
Yeah.
And
Thanks,
then
Trendlin.
and then because people are so burned out that they can't do anything, then the people who can do things are doing more work. and then they get so burned out.
Yeah.
And we have like this cycle going. So yeah, I would like your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah. I mean, I can relate. We're experiencing the same thing in different spaces. And, you know, I don't want to say that I'm actually practicing what I'm saying because I'm not, but ideally, you know, this is going to go on for the long haul. Like this is not going to just
The
end
long
tomorrow. You
haul.
know, it could even go on for our lifetimes. And so I think there are tools out there that we could rely on, but we're not. So for example, first of all, you know, community accountability practices, restorative justice practices that we can bring into our organizing spaces. There are so many resources, you know, out there. I could recommend books or, you know, if you want, where our movements, our organizations can actually be real about the harm that has been that many of us have been enduring in our movement spaces. And it's not a distraction, you know, it's not a waste of time. I'm trying to think of this example. There was a recent example where I hesitated before bringing something up because because it could be seen as a distraction, you know, that kind of thing. And then I'm like, no, this is not a distraction. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that's another thing, is to shift the way we think about what we are allowed to prioritize in our organizations. You know, it's like, no, like making sure all of us are okay, and, you know, challenging sexism and homophobia in our movement spaces is equally important as all the other work. So I think that's another one. So the restorative justice would be to respond to your question, right, about the burnout. I was actually using that to respond to the burnout, because it would be like in a way, like the first thing to do would be like accountability process around these questions of why are some people doing more work than others, and how to call people in rather than call people out, and use these conversations as a way to like grow
Hang on.
people's relationships with each.
Hang on. I want to make this very clear though. If you show up believing something that is not true because you've been lied to by conservative influencers, that's not your fault, bro. That's not your fault. This is a big confusing topic. I don't ever want... Listen. There are some people who come into the chat and consistently do not listen to the things that I'm telling them. Those people are much more likely to get an evil tone from me if they have consistently, over the course of like months, come into my chat and don't listen when I give them the answers, or pretend they didn't hear it because it wasn't the answer that they liked. Those people are going to get treated much differently when they keep bringing up the same questions over and over and over, the same themes over and over and over, or they keep doing the thing where they ask the question and then they don't listen to the answer because they don't like the answer that's given. Those people are going to get a much different tone than someone who's coming in and new, and I know that you're new because I pay attention to who's in my chat, and are just trying to understand and are asking good questions, and maybe have been led the wrong way by really awful people who are making money off of lying to people. Like, that's there is no shame in showing up believing something that isn't true because you were lied to by people that you trusted, okay? So I don't want you to feel bad about that. I want you to ask whatever questions you want to ask, and there's no shame in it. Just make sure you listen to the answers, because the answers are coming from stuff you can see right in front of you. All right, let's finish this up. We got a couple minutes left.
Each other and move through these tensions, because what happens is if you don't do that, then everyone starts like, you know, gossiping, and all these rifts happen, and then there's like a bad guy and a good guy, a good person and a bad person, and none of that is gonna, you know, we need to think about the larger reason we're here, you know. And the reality is that is the hardest work. the most difficult work that everyone wants to avoid is looking inwards and having difficult conversations with each other. And we're going to have to learn how to do it. We're going to have to learn how to have these conversations with each other, even if they're difficult.
And Will's right there.
Yeah, Will.
Yeah?
Like
Okay, is that a restorative justice person?
Yeah,
All right, there
Has
you
taught
go.
us
There's a
so
resource.
much, actually,
Okay,
about
that's
how to do
amazing.
this.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, so really. And I will admit that it doesn't come naturally to me.
Yeah.
So I also have learned a lot from Will on this. I think it's good, like, if I can understand what, so it's basically like to think about the work we do in social movements, the work we do for Palestine right now and in solidarity and towards the liberation of Palestine, is that activism doesn't exist outside the world, right? So through our activism, we also are building the worlds we want through actually how we do our activism.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we forget that and we turn it into a sort of, this is activism about how to change the world. And then we reproduce so much of what we don't like about the world. Yeah. Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. So everybody,
Nice.
like, get your things if you are fasting.
Nice.
I think there's,
All right.
should I get
I think that's pretty much over. Six says everyone should be kicked out of Israel and Palestine and the whole place should be turned into a museum. That's actually like not the worst idea that I've ever heard. That's not a bad idea at all. All right, we got through this talk. Thank you, Stu, for providing us with this amazing. I mean, there's just like, my mind was very, very blown by some of the things that I heard. I wish I had time to do a proper debrief, but I don't, because I'm starting a community call in like 2 minutes. Again, I will be sending out the link to my local supporters. If you are on my Substack supporter, head over there, which is Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. And what I need you to do is go to this Unwoke Roundup email. The newest one, it's got the supporter perks for this week, and I need you to scroll all the way down to the bottom, all the way down, and underneath this red box, you will find a link to tonight's community Zoom. I'm also going to send out a little reminder in the chat for subscribers on the Substack, just because this is a different day than we usually do them. But thank you guys for hanging out, and I will be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Take care, guys. We'll see you soon. Bye.